Let's begin. Welcome everybody to our Provo Municipal Council meeting. It is 5:32 p.m. on Tuesday, August 20th, 2020. This meeting will be conducted entirely via electronic means. On August 10th, 2020, in accordance with Utah Code 52-4-2074, the council chair, George Handley, determined that conducting meetings of the municipal council with an anchor location, such as the municipal council chamber, presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present there. These are the facts upon which I, Mr. Handley, made this determination. Utah has been in a declared state of emergency due to COVID-19 since March 6, 2020, a disease outbreak which the World Health Organization has characterized as a pandemic. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, state that COVID-19 is easily spread from person to person between people who are in close contact with one another. The disease spreads through respiratory droplets when an infected person coughs, sneezes, or talks, and it may be spread by people who are asymptomatic. Federal, state, and local authorities have recommended that individuals limit public gatherings, wear face masks, and follow social distancing guidelines. Notwithstanding that Utah generally and Utah County specifically have been moved to the low-risk yellow phase, reported COVID-19 cases in Provo continue to rise at a high rate, more than 100 cases per day on a 14-day average. Physical distancing measures will be difficult to set up and maintain in the Provo City Municipal Council chamber. Additionally, the chair of the governing board of the redevelopment agency of Provo City has determined that its meetings are subject to the same risks and has adopted the same procedures as the municipal council. This meeting will be available to the public for live broadcast and on-demand viewing at youtube.com Provo City Council. The council requests that attendees help maintain the decorum of the meeting by silencing electronic devices and being respectful to others, and please wait to speak until called on by the council chair. In the current situation where the meeting is being held via Zoom webinar and broadcast over YouTube, I remind you to turn off your mics when not speaking so as to minimize the potential for background noises and conversations to be picked up, recorded, and broadcast for all to hear. I will now introduce the council members who are joining me. I am George Handley, the council chair. Dave Harding, our vice chair, is unavailable today, and so he is not going to be with us. But I'm joined by Dave Shipley, Dave Sewell, Bill Fillmore, Shannon Ellsworth, and Travis Hoban. We're also joined by Mayor Kafusi, Wayne Parker, the Chief Administrative Officer, and Cliff Strachan, our Council Executive Director, Brian Jones, our Council Attorney, and other associated staff of the city who are, I see Chief Ferguson is with us, and Dixon Holmes, Assistant Administrative Officer for the city, and other staff. So we will have an opening prayer, and this will be offered by a Provo City resident, Tracy Kilcrease. I hope I said that correctly, Tracy. And then we will have a Pledge of Allegiance by Bill Fillmore. Go ahead, Ms. Kilcrease.
Our dear Father in heaven, we are thankful for the many blessings that we have received in our community. We are thankful for the government that we have that works so hard to provide for us. We ask Thee to be with us and to guide those who speak today to have clarity of thought and to be able to speak in a way that they can share what is on their mind. We ask Thee to guide the council as they make decisions for those of us who live in Provo, that they will be guided to do what's best for all people who are in Provo, and to have their hearts and minds open. And we say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. All right, Mr. Fillmore.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right. So we have two items on our action agenda this evening. And we'll start with the first one, which is an implied motion on a consideration of a resolution calling for increased efforts to mitigate the COVID-19 pandemic. We're going to tackle both of these agenda items, or at least we're going to introduce them tonight. The second one is a consideration of an ordinance related to COVID-19 pandemic responses, including face coverings and public gatherings. I, as council chair, would like to make a few introductory remarks to explain a little bit about what our purpose is this evening and why this meeting has been convened. I would like to invite our Mayor Michelle Kafusi, to offer her comments following mine, and then Cliff Strachan will offer some background and some summary of some survey results, and then we will open it up for public comment. Mr. Strachan will provide some instruction about public comment when he gets to that point. So let me begin by saying that as a city council, we are charged with the sobering responsibility to ensure the health, safety, and general welfare of the public. This is one of the chief founding principles of municipal governments. So it is not only appropriate and legal for us, but it is our sworn responsibility to consider ways to minimize any risk to the health, safety, and general welfare of the public, including, of course, the risk that COVID-19 presents to our community. We, as a city council, understand that masks are an effective method for reducing the chances for the spread of COVID-19. Of course, masks do not ensure infection will not happen, but they protect those around us, and they even have the potential to minimize the symptoms of the disease if the wearer contracts it. We also understand that mask wearing becomes the most effective in driving rates of infection down and in minimizing outbreaks when we get closer to 80% compliance in a community. Studies suggest that mandates have improved compliance on average by 15 to 20%, and that they have saved thousands of lives across the country where they have been implemented. We recognize that mandates are not without problems, especially with regard to enforcement. We are united in our concern that whatever we do tonight, we should find a way to minimize the burden placed on our police force, and that we do not wish to criminalize misbehavior or create an overly burdensome set of restrictions. We simply want to find ways to achieve higher levels of compliance, and we want to minimize risk in the areas where risk is highest. A little bit of background on why this discussion was initiated and maybe why it is happening rather quickly in this given week. I think I can speak for myself anyway, that I was not planning or thinking far enough ahead as a city council member as perhaps I should have over the course of the summer, with regard to the potential impact it would have on our community to have tens of thousands of students arriving in the fall for school, both at Utah Valley University and at Brigham Young University. And I think that said, we should have started this conversation sooner. And I have lost a fair amount of sleep over that fact. I regret it. I regret it deeply. But I just simply didn't connect the dots at first about what would be different about thousands of students arriving in our community. But the bottom line is that we are going to be a very different population in the next week. And as a council, as we began to discuss this, we felt the need to be prepared for the strong possibility of spikes in infections and the related risks to the health and safety of this community. And as we've researched this further, our concern has even grown. What we do or don't do in just the next few days and few weeks may significantly impact the level of infection in significant ways. So the council felt that rather than reacting retroactively to what has transpired in the past, we should use the best information we could gather to proactively anticipate and minimize risk going forward, and to do so expeditiously and as quickly as possible. We, of course, want to do it well, and we want to do what's right, and that's why we're gathered here tonight. I think it's also important for me to say something about BYU as an institution and its efforts. In recent days, the BYU's plan has unfolded to its own community and to the public, and we have become more aware of that plan for this fall. And I think it's safe to say that we are very impressed and very appreciative of their thoughtfulness. Just yesterday, 3 council members met with BYU officials and with the mayor, and we went through their plans in some detail. We know that they are sending a strong message to their students and to everyone in the campus community, including specific instructions and expectations about conformity to the best health guidelines available. And we are confident that BYU will monitor this situation very closely and responsibly. We know that the university will take quick action if a spike occurs. We have high confidence in their leadership. Our interest in a possible resolution and possible ordinance should not be taken as a reflection of distrust in their efforts. On the contrary, we feel that they have shown how important it is to plan carefully as a community to meet the challenges ahead and to promote compliance with the recommended practices of mask wearing, hand washing, and social distancing. And as I say, I think it has become apparent to us on the council that we did not have enough of a plan in place as a city to complement their plan. Because we know that BYU will take quick action if things begin to get out of control, we also know that that could mean that the chances of school remaining in session and students remaining in Provo are in question. Something I think we would all agree on is that we would like students to stay in Provo. But this depends, in our judgment, in part on what happens off campus, something that BYU has acknowledged is harder for them to monitor or enforce. Even if classes do end up having to go entirely online, if spikes happen, Provo will still have a large student population in our community who, by virtue of their living circumstances in apartments and dorms where they share kitchens and bathrooms, are at high risk of infection. And by virtue of their presence in our community, at high risk of spreading that infection, especially to those most vulnerable. And let me say that this isn't all about the students. They and their parents also need and want assurances that this community is taking the right precautions and setting the best example of how we hope they will behave in our community. So I think it is fair to say that is the reason for our concern as a city council. Finally, it is important that we recognize and respect the fact that the mayor and the administration have expressed legitimate concerns about associated challenges and the desirability of a mandate, all while being fully committed to a wonderful educational campaign that is ongoing and that is promoting the use of masks. We hope to work in close collaboration with the administration, no matter what the result of tonight's meetings. Our actions in calling for this meeting should not be construed as a sign of disregard for those the concerns of the administration, nor for their notable efforts. There may be honest differences of opinion about what is the best thing to do, but we believe we are all united in trying to do what is right and best for our community. So I'll turn the time over to Mayor Kaufusi.
Thank you, Council Chair Handley. I really appreciate your kind words and your sincere comments. As you all know, I love Provo and I love its residents, and I love and respect each of you members of the City Council. I appreciate your strong interest in keeping Provo residents safe. You have called this special session today to consider a resolution and legislation aimed at keeping Provo safe. I fully respect your ability to do this. I'm grateful to be able to share with you some final thoughts on the topic of a mandate. After sharing this, I plan to mostly just listen to your deliberations. This is your meeting. You have heard my position and you know where I stand. My approach to this pandemic has been guided by a number of principles, including the following. Number one, following the guidance of the health authorities in our state and region. Provo City has no health department, and I am not a health expert, but our system of government provides authority and resources to state and local health departments to closely monitor this pandemic and provide guidance. I think I can safely say I have been religious about following the guidance. Number two, respect for and partnership with community partners, including universities and nonprofits and elected officials in our area. Before I get to the next principle, let me say this. With the exception of a few of you on this city council, I can honestly say that none of the above partners has asked me to issue a mask mandate of any kind. Not the county health department, not a university, not a legislator. Again, except you. Third, a preference for persuasion and education over the exercise of authority through orders or mandates. Fourth, esteem for the people in our city. I like the signal that no mandate sends to our citizens. It says, I trust them, and I really do. It keeps them on the level of equal partnership with government leaders in addressing the pandemic. To me, a mandate sends a different signal. Fifth, respect for the views of our police chief, who has been strongly against any form of mandate. There are other principles, but those are some of the most important ones to me. My approach has been to work with you and other community partners and citizens to promote and encourage best practices. I thank you and everyone else who has been involved in those efforts. I think they have been very successful, and I question whether a departure from a spirit of cooperation and trust to an era of mandates is the path of wisdom here. My vision is that Provo is a city on a hill, not just for quality of life and a robust economy, as we have now long been, but also in our response to the pandemic. Let's be a shining example of how a city, through a spirit of cooperation and self-initiated goodwill, can rise above this pandemic. If you would like to see a robust campaign to help engage in incoming student populations in a positive way to adhere to best practices, I am 100% for it. Working together, you as members of the City Council can help us formulate and implement a positive strategy to encourage a high level of self-regulation from the incoming student population. To me, that would be a better way to go than a mandate. But again, I respect your powers and I appreciate the chance to share my views. If you would be willing to hear a brief statement from Chief Ferguson now that he is prepared, I would be grateful. It should take about 1 to 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And of course, Chief Ferguson, feel free to share your thoughts.
Thank you, Council, for having me. I just have a couple of prepared statements. To start, let me say I believe that the recommendations from the governor and the mayor to wear a mask is wise. I believe we should all be wearing a mask and social distancing in public. However, I do not believe that a mask mandate in Provo is appropriate. Our own health department is not calling for a mandate here. The use of armed officers to enforce a new health code will create problems and erode trust. Any suggestion that we enact a mandate but not enforce it sends the wrong message about our public order. A mandate will cause hundreds of calls, I anticipate, coming into our 911 center and tie up police resources. I don't have the resources to respond to the calls that the city doesn't want to enforce in the first place. For these reasons, I recommend against any type of a mandate in Provo. I appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate you being here. All right, Mr. Strachan. You are muted.
All right. Just a reminder that 2 days ago, when the council met and considered what to do about a possible mask mandate, and they discussed the issues surrounding that large party that was held indoors without regard to social distancing and the use of masks. And that was a trigger for the council. Plus, the council had learned that of a BYU study that projected significant increases in COVID-19 cases at the student population does not take sufficient precautions when off the campus. And a recognition that the BYU campus is imposing its own restrictive social distancing and mask requirements. And that speaks volumes to the position that BYU has about protecting the safety of their students. And as we heard on Tuesday, one of the concerns is that off campus, despite the education and admonitions from BYU to their student population, when students get out into the general population and interact, there is less perhaps clarity, if not requirements, as to what they should and shouldn't do with respect to masking and social distancing. So these concerns raised for council some concerns, and wanted to have a discussion tonight and to consider the two items, the resolution and the possible ordinance mandating the use of masks in public places and other places as the council might consider. So staff was asked to bring those to the council today for your consideration. The resolution will be presented shortly, and we'll go over that and talk about the specifics of it. I want to emphasize that we all recognize that these are difficult times, stressful times, but we also recognize that reasonable minds can disagree even to the best solutions for these circumstances. And this is part of the debate that's affecting not only Provo and the state, but the country as a whole. We want to point out that there are some significant areas where opponents and proponents seem to agree. First, we all want to beat the disease and return our lives and our economy to normal as soon as and as safely as possible. We have learned that COVID-19 affects different demographics differently, though not uniformly. The elderly are more at risk than the young. People with a variety of pre-existing health conditions are more vulnerable. And there is some evidence that poor Black, Latino, and Native populations are more highly affected than whites. Masks reduce transmissions of COVID-19, not by filtering out external particles, but by reducing emissions of particles from infected people, including pre-symptomatic individuals. Some of the opposition to masks for some comes from early statements when we were first learning about COVID and trying to understand how it's transmitted. Some of the early advice was that masks wouldn't work, and that was based on the transmission of other diseases from studies that had happened previously. But over this year, we're now 8 months into the year, studies that have been done by government agencies like health departments, by the CDC, by medical professionals and epidemiologists around the world, have found that masks actually do have a significant benefit, particularly for people not to transmit the particles of COVID-19 from me to you, but or from you to me, but to actually prevent me transmitting it to you, and that's a significant. We know that masks are not a perfect solution. They are only shown to work in combination with other interventions such as physical distancing, if necessary, quarantining, and simple things like hand hygiene and other healthy practices that we might follow. Even without the overt politicization of COVID-19 and responses to it, and what the reality of the risk is, there are some significant areas of disagreement, largely based on the distrust of government, its institutions, the data, and other factors. And some believe that the government can or should not, or can't and should not mandate restrictions. So those are some of the areas of disagreement that we have. there's confusion about changing recommendations, but the answer is that the recommendations that are being given to us by health officials is based on new data as the medical and epidemiological information is updated. So sometimes it feels like a moving target. I don't disagree that it isn't. Now, in the last week, councilors and the mayor have been receiving many emails, and the count count I have is somewhere around 170 emails, and they're running about 60-40 in favor of a mandate. And even some of those who propose or suggest or argue that we shouldn't have a mandate recognize that mask use is important. So we also then, with council's permission, created an open city hall survey that we put out. And as we noted earlier, that we've had a record number for us of responses, about 2,700. And I've asked Karen to take a few minutes and just give us an overview of what we've seen here.
Okay, Hannah, can you pull up that summary? Okay.
Which one of them do you want?
Here we go. So like Cliff had mentioned, we have had a record number of participants on this. We originally, our previous high was 1,352 participants, and that was on the subject of brew pubs. This time around, and that survey was up for nearly 2 weeks. This one was up 26 hours and had 2,675 responses. So if we can scroll down. Okay. So we had a good variety of ranges. Actually, some of it kind of mirrors it's a pretty good mirror of the population there. The one thing we did note is where our population is split pretty much down the middle on gender. We saw a different split here on taking the survey. 2/3 were women, and not sure if that's skewed because social media, not sure, or people's email lists, but that's where that one is at. So just keep that in mind. And this isn't scientific. This is just everybody take it that can. And this is a combination of registered and unregistered. So there's always the potential with the unregistered ones that there are duplicate surveys done by people. Go ahead and go to the next one. Okay, so we have the vast majority completing it right now are in single family homes. I'm guessing that's most likely because we don't have as much of the college population here yet. We had a good number that do have a high-risk person in their household. And then you can see there kind of the spread of how many people work outside the home, work inside the home, our college students so far, and our K through 12 students taking the survey. Go ahead to the next one. And then we asked if they live in Provo, work in Provo, shop in Provo, to kind of get their involvement there. It helps to know, sometimes it gets shared with people from outside of our area, but they may have a connection like working or shopping here and have a stake in what we're doing. And then we asked a few other things about their involvement in high-risk exposure jobs. And then we asked them to kind of rank the areas where they felt like you were at higher risk to being exposed. And the average overall put school and educational environment at the top, and then shopping, work, and home. Go to the next one. Oh, and then outdoor areas. So in reporting whether they wear a mask, almost always, about nearly 2/3 When I remember is a low amount. Only if it's required, you can see that's about 23%, and then just flat out no, 11%. And then these statements on kind of the feelings on masks. So wearing a mask protects the wearer from some exposure to the virus, 57.1%. Wearing a mask protects others from some exposure to the virus, 70.8%. Wearing a mask has no protection, 20.4%. And then wearing a mask is harmful to the wearer, 20.9%. And then we asked if they follow the other than the mask guideline, do they follow other recommended guidelines during the pandemic? 78.5% saying always or almost always. And then usually, rarely, and not following are pretty small there. When businesses require a mask, we have 53% saying that they're more likely to go to a business that requires masks, 26.9% saying less likely, about 20% saying no difference. And then the support for a mask mandate, strongly support 52.7%, support 6.7%, neutral 2.8%. And excuse me if I get any numbers wrong, it's kind of small on my screen and my eyes are failing me. So those in opposition, oh, thank you. Ask and ye shall receive. Okay. Oppose 5.6% and strongly oppose 32.2%. It stayed pretty consistent through the life of the survey, as far as being about 2/3 generally in favor and 1/3 generally opposed. We did see a bit of a surge on the opposition just in the later part of the day. Let's go to the next part. So we did ask them on why they were opposed or why they supported. Hannah, did you want to chime in with your top ones on that? We didn't have enough time to really fully flesh it out other than kind of get an idea of the top three.
Looking at the 100 or so of the first responses that we received simply because we were short on time, overwhelmingly, the top answer was that it should be a personal choice or it's not up to government to mandate something like that. The next most common was that masks have no effect or have a negative effect. Negative effects that people listed included that people touch their face and eyes more when they're wearing a mask, so it increases potential exposure to viral particles. Also, that it could be socially inhibiting. It makes people sound different, is unhealthy for children's socialization, things like that. A few people also mentioned potentially facilitating crime as an additional barrier to identification. The next most common, as far as we could tell, but it was a fairly close tie with some of the others, was that we should return to business as normal as much as possible, that we have dealt with other diseases without extreme measures and should take the same actions for COVID-19.
And the support ones?
I did not have a chance to look at the support ones yet. Sorry. But from my early glance, the most common response seemed to be community-oriented, that people thought that wearing face masks could help protect the more vulnerable in society, and they saw it as a sort of everyone doing their part to protect those who were the most vulnerable, was, again, overwhelmingly a common theme.
Okay, then the next question was trying to gauge what people thought about the appropriate use of governmental power to enact a mandate. And you'll have to scroll up for that one, Hannah. Hoping we can still fit it on the screen because it's a 1 to 10.
Scroll up, you said, Karen?
Or sorry, down.
There we go. Okay.
Picture move up. Mouse moved down. Yeah, so this one, I guess it split across 2 pages. So you're going to see that you've got close to 40% at the lower end, which was that one was an extreme overreach. And then if you want to scroll down to show 10 on there, you've got a little bit higher, but not a whole lot higher, saying an appropriate use, the most appropriate use of government power. And then the next two questions we asked whether they agreed with some statements. One is, do you agree with the statement that each person should be able to choose whether or not to wear a mask in public? See, strongly agree, 33.5%. Disagree and strongly disagree is over 50% in that one. And then if the next one is, do you agree with the statement that you have a responsibility to wear a mask in public? And you can see that it's stronger on the strongly agree and then disagree and strongly agree is about 30% of that one. If Provo City requires masks to be worn in public, what impact will it have on the spread of COVID-19? 45.7% say strong impact, 16.8% say some impact, not sure, 5.1%. Then you've got 16.6% say little impact and 15.8% say no impact. And then who should have the authority to issue a mask mandate for Provo? 33.7% said nobody, and you can see the rest are very similar in the 50% range. If a mask mandate were enacted in Provo, how long should it last? And so we gave them options on infection rate. 46.4% opted for based on the infection rate. For a specific time period, 26.8% wanted to base it on that. Here we go. Until a vaccine is approved, 24.3%, and other, which I figured would probably also catch people that just didn't want to do a mandate, that's 28.6%. And then how should it be enforced? You can see most are opting for education, and then verbal warnings. Civil fine drops down to 41.4%. Criminal citation, criminal prosecution, those are very low. None of the above was nearly 30%. And then assuming you support a mask mandate, if enforcement through fines and criminal penalties is not an option, should a mandate still be implemented? And nearly 60% said yes to that one. I think, is that the last one before it goes into another? And then the rest was an open-ended question. So that's what we have, and what we can tell you in the limited amount of time we had to go over the data that was brought in from that survey. And then I also emailed out to you not only this, but then some comments gathered on Facebook and Twitter. And I hear you've had a few emails as well. So I'll turn it back over to Cliff.
If you're muted.
Mute myself. Karen, thank you for that overview and for staff putting that together and getting it ready and trying to digest it very quickly. Really pleased with the responses that we got in terms of numbers and reach, and glad to have that tool. Let me take control now. Hannah, I'll share my screen.
Would you like the resolution up?
Not yet.
All right.
All right, I'm going to share this one. Sure. Okay. This is what we call user error here. All right. So George briefly touched on the additional studies that we had talked about on Monday. The first one was making sense of the research on COVID-19 and school reopenings, and there's a link there, and we'll make that available online. Children and adolescents are not immune, but the disease is usually less severe and less easily transmitted. Factors for successful school openings include low community spread and preventative measures at school. Very aware that 16,000 public school students are gone back either this week or next week, and interactions there, and there's hundreds more, thousands more teachers that are also involved in that. There are substantial risks to not opening schools. Safe reopenings require family and community support, and risk of outbreaks is very high in colleges and universities, again, as George outlined, because of the interconnectedness of way students interact with one another and their housing situations particularly. Another study was the wearing masks has been shown to reduce the transmission of COVID. Masks prevent infected people from spreading it by trapping the respiratory droplets. Different types of masks have better efficiencies than others. We're hearing that certain types of gaiters are not recommended, but some do may actually cause more problems. There is some evidence that masks protect the wearer from the virus, but clearly it's stronger going the other way. Masks are typically highly safe, but there are some minor and uncommon side effects for children, adults, and the elderly. And a lot of the comments that we did get in our emails focused on the impacts on people with certain health or medical or mental health issues around it. And every guideline I've seen so far has some kind of exemption for people who for some reason can't tolerate masks. One of the complaints we hear from people is that masks somehow causing or actually unhealthy for people. The information that we've seen on the state site and others have suggested that that's not the case if masks are routinely and regularly changed out and washed as appropriate and carried forward that way. So you can imagine if you're wearing the same mask for 5 days, that it can get pretty gnarly at times. Masks are one of the most powerful and cost-effective tools to stop COVID-19 and help accelerate the economic recovery. And I think in Utah, we've done a really good job of that. Our economy it's rolling along a lot better than most of the country, but it still can improve more. Masks are most effective when combined with distancing. Those are some of the things that we've learned. Case studies, case rates in Utah County. Some of you remember the White House document from July that was obtained by the Center for Public Integrity, found that Utah and 17 other states were in the red zone. In other words, a new case rate of more than 100 per 100,000 people. We checked and updated that. Utah State's rates right now for the last week are 173 per 100,000, and Utah County is lower than that. I think we're fifth in the state at 118 per 100,000. We still are in the red zone. Utah County has the fifth highest case rate in the state of 1,576 per 100,000, and West Provo's highest case rate in the county is almost double what Utah County's is, and so those kind of numbers should concern us. All right, I want to introduce and go over the resolution that we've drafted with council input and the guidance that we've been given. Hannah's going to bring that up and share. Oh, I got to stop my share. Okay. All right. So this is a resolution of the Provo City Municipal Council regarding the necessity of social distancing and/or mask wearing to prevent the spread of COVID. The preamble reads as follows: whereas the state of Utah has been in declared state of emergency due to novel coronavirus since March 6th, 2020, which worldwide disease outbreak has been characterized by the World Health Organization as a pandemic. And whereas the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention advises that COVID-19 is easily spread through the air from person to person who are in close contact with one another. And whereas federal, state, and local authorities have recommended that individuals limit public gatherings, wear face masks, and follow social distancing guidelines. And whereas a BYU study, Making Sense of the Research on COVID-19 and Masks, which we just referenced, concluded that masks could be one of the most powerful and cost-effective tools to stop COVID-19 and accelerate the economic recovery, end quote. And whereas another BYU study, Provo City and BYU need to be partners during COVID-19, notes that while BYU has done extensive work to reduce the spread of COVID-19 through on-campus networks, the close proximity and interconnectedness of the students with the larger community off campus can seed larger outbreaks of the disease. Therefore, the study recommends that masks be required in all businesses and enclosed spaces outside the home, and that gatherings larger than 50 people not be permitted. And whereas approximately 16,000 public school students and another 70,000 BYU and UVU students are returning to school over the next few weeks, most of whom will live, work, study, shop, and recreate in Provo and Orem, thereby expanding the interconnectedness of social networks and economic activity in our communities. And whereas without greater compliance to the state's phased guidelines for the general public and businesses to maximize public health and economic reactivation, including social distancing and the wearing of masks, to slow the transmission of COVID-19, the city, county, and state risk greater restrictions on business and school operations and the corollary effects of such restrictions. So that's the preamble. And here's what's proposed. Now, therefore, be it resolved that we, the members of the Provo City Municipal Council, declare that this is a time to act collaboratively on behalf of others. It is the nature of a pandemic that only collective action that reaches high rates of compliance will ensure protection to the whole community and reduce the most significant risks to individuals. We call upon all persons who live, work, study, shop, or play in Provo City to accept personal responsibility to each do our part to follow public health guidelines to the best of their abilities and within reason. Specifically, we believe it necessary that the following measures be implemented at the state, county, and municipal levels. Require the wearing of face masks at any public spaces, public buildings, and public events where social distancing is not reasonable, possible, or prudent. And B, require the wearing of masks at any indoor gathering over 50 persons, regardless of whether social distancing can be observed, and encourage the same for smaller gatherings where social distancing is not possible. And require the posting of signage at all entrances to public spaces and public buildings, and encourage the same with local businesses requiring the wearing of face masks where social distancing is not reasonable, possible, or prudent. And D, that these additional public health guidelines remain in effect so long as the state, county, or city declared public health emergency continues. And that's that's what we're asking, the council's asking for people to do. Now, what are they asking the mayor to do? Call upon Provo City Mayor Kafusi and her administration to take every necessary and reasonable action to educate, exhort, and help our residents, businesses, and visitors comply with comprehensive social distancing and public masking protocols that address the immediate public health concerns. And B, expand the city's Mask Up information campaign to spread awareness and increase compliance with the state of Utah's phased guidelines for the general public and businesses to maximize public health and economic reactivation. And to request the appropriation, if necessary, of funds necessary to support this effort. And C, coordinate the city's efforts with local universities and public schools and neighboring towns. And 3, council's calling upon all persons who live, work, study, shop, or play in Provo City to take this COVID-19 crisis seriously and comply with public health protocols, not just for one's own sake, but also to protect our fellow citizens and allay their fears. We urge everyone, except those who, for medical and mental health reasons, cannot or should not, we urge everyone to wear masks in public for the benefit of others, which we believe to be a moral and community health imperative for all of us at this critical time. And B, Be respectful of those persons whose opinions and health issues are different than your own on these public health measures. And C, follow the directives of our elected state and local leaders and our state and county health departments, relying upon the common sense and charitable character of Provo's citizens, with the hope that COVID-19 infection rate does not increase to such an extent that more restrictive measures become a public health necessity. Mr. Chair, I'm going to turn the time back over to you, and I'm open to answering any questions on this, whether it's on this or the data or anything else that you are interested in talking about. And before we do, let me pause and just allow people who are interested in the public comment portion that will follow any discussion before the council discuss the merits of the resolution.
Let me just clarify, it's for the public. So you're going to read the instructions on how people can call in. But after you do that, we're going to have I'm going to bring the discussion briefly back to the council in case there's any questions for the staff. And then I will turn it to any public comment. And anyway, I think you said that in there, but I just wanted to clarify for people.
And after the public's had a chance to comment, only then will you debate the merits and whether or not to adopt this resolution. Right. For the public comment portion of the meeting, usually there are 3 types of items for which public comment is received. The first is the open public comment period, which we dispense with tonight. The second is for items requiring a public hearing, which also doesn't apply tonight. The third type of item for public comment that will be received is this one, where the council is willing to allow time for public comments on each item. Normally, we only allow up to 15 minutes, but it's up to the chair to determine whether or not we hear from everybody that wants to speak on this. Because the city council is meeting virtually using Zoom webinar, and this meeting is being broadcast on Provo City Council's YouTube channel and on Facebook, we have enabled telephone access to receive public comment, the numbers for which are shown on the screen right now. Callers may have to try multiple numbers to get connected. When a caller is connected, they will be required to enter the meeting ID and enter the pound symbol. When asked for a personal ID number, enter pound. The caller will now enter the meeting as an attendee and will be able to hear the meeting when muted. If a caller wishes to speak on the item being discussed, they can press *9 to indicate their desire to comment and then wait to be called upon. Callers will be called upon by the last 4 digits of the listed phone number. Please provide your name and city of residence before making your comments. Each caller will be given up to 2 minutes to speak. A timer will be posted on screen and a beep should be audible to the caller when your time is up. A reminder that there's a lag of approximately 30 to 60 seconds, depending on your connection, between the meeting and the broadcast. To avoid confusion, callers should mute the YouTube or Facebook broadcast to hear their discussion in real time. And you go ahead and start queuing up if you are interested in talking to the council, and we'll come back to public comment when the chair directs.
Thank you, Mr. Strachan. Any questions from the directed to staff about the presentation of the survey results and any other matters? I maybe have one question that kind of went by quickly on the survey results, but I thought I saw on the, I think it was, how strongly do you feel about wearing masks in public or something like that? And I thought it was kind of interesting that it looked like there was close to a 2/3 majority who felt that that was a priority. And then there was, it seemed like again, it went by so quickly, but I think it was about 12 to 13% were kind of in the middle. And then there was the remaining percentage, 20% or so, that were sort of not at all interested. I thought that this survey results, there's been a lot of, I've been receiving a lot of emails about what people perceive to be the rate of compliance in Provo. And I've heard everything from practically never to 95% of the time, everyone's wearing a mask. And I don't question anybody's anecdotal observations of what they've seen, but clearly we have not had the most accurate data about compliance. And I don't know if this study gets us a little bit closer to some of those indications, but I thought that was interesting. There's several others there that might be used to give us some idea of what we might guess to be a compliance rate, but it seemed to me somewhere in the 60 to 70% of the public takes this seriously, recognizes that it's valuable, and does it either all the time or at least when businesses require it. That still leaves a gap, and that's the gap that has been concerning me all along, because if we're stuck at 65% of the public that's using masks, that doesn't get us to the 80% threshold that really makes a difference, especially when things get very bad. And I'm intrigued by that 12 to 13% that was somewhere in the middle. Seems like that's actually a common pattern I've seen on lots of issues. There's sort of the neutral middle, and they're the people I would submit seem to be the target here. And we may not be able to persuade people who are totally opposed or don't see the value, but if there are people in the middle who see that there's a mandate, we may be able to move from 65 to 80. Am I remembering those statistics more or less correctly? I guess that's basically my question, because I was trying to quickly study them as it went by.
Yeah, I think you're in the range. I mean, whether or not you have the exact percentages, you're in the range of the reality there. I think what's important to recognize is that even those who oppose a mask mandate, many of them also recognize the value in it. And I don't know that we got into the detail of how many of those who oppose the mandate but still want masks to be worn. I don't know what that breaks out to be, but I know on the emails that we were getting, even those who are opposed to a mandate, a significant portion of them were indicating that, hey, I already wear a mask. I just don't want to be told what to wear, that I have to wear it, and that they are wearing masks. So I think you're right. You were trying to get, how do we get the number from 60 or 70 up to 80 or 90? How do we create? How do we help support a culture in which the expectation is that you wear masks? And one of the things that we've seen, and again, I'll say it's anecdotal because I haven't looked at and seen the actual stats on it, but it seems to be that where there's signage and where businesses and facilities are requiring masks rather than the government telling them to do, that mask usage goes up. And just to share a couple anecdotes or a couple examples, there are many times when I myself or others I've talked to about this, if they go into a business and they see a sign that people are expected to wear masks or required to wear masks, and required is for a business to impose is a much more efficient way of doing it than for just to simply say, hey, masks are requested, right? People will more often than not make sure they have a mask on when they go into those businesses. There's also a lot of just in my interactions with people, what I've noticed is that if somebody's wearing a mask, somebody else will put a mask on just out of courtesy and respect. And so I think part of the resolution is trying to get people to work on their personal responsibility, to recognize and have respect for others, and try to just honor the need that some people feel. There are people who are very, very stressed out about the current situation, and whether that's overblown or understated, I don't know. But I think the average civic-minded person is going to be responsive to other people based on what's happening around them. So the more that we can norm and make mask wearing the norm, the better off I think we are, and the more likely we are to get to that herd immunity kind of level. Shannon has a question.
Yeah, just to reference what Mr. Strachan said, I research that was presented by the professors at BYU said that we shouldn't expect herd immunity. But my question is around enforcement and non-enforcement. What has the staff learned from other cities, counties, and states that have a mandate or a resolution or an ordinance about enforcement and non-enforcement? What does that look like?
From my understanding, Chief Ferguson had commented on Tuesday, and I think again today, commented that that police departments aren't routinely going out and citing people for not wearing masks. Salt Lake County's mask order is based on the health department going after, or I don't like use going after, but educating and in some cases citing businesses who aren't requiring the masks in their operations. It's not a case of people going out looking for people to snitch on other people who aren't wearing masks, but rather to recognize that in some cases there are businesses operating that are not being responsible with mask use given the public order that exists in Salt Lake City and Salt Lake County.
Other questions for the staff? Okay, I see a caller. Why don't we turn to, I don't know if this is, oh wait, I do have a question from Mr. Hoban. Go ahead.
Yeah, I thought it might be useful to explain the difference between, say, a resolution and an ordinance. I don't know if that might help those that are calling in to understand, you know, what's happening. Maybe that's something Cliff could cover.
Yeah, actually, I want to defer that one to Brian.
Yeah, I'd be happy.
Okay.
As council attorney.
I'd be happy to talk about that. So in our form of government, where we have separation of powers with a city council and an elected mayor, who is the head of the executive branch, the council exercises legislative power. And under state code, legislative power is, for the most part, with a couple of brief small exceptions, exercised through ordinances, which actually, by and large, change the city code. So an ordinance is an action by the city council that usually changes the law in Provo, either by amending the city code or perhaps by changing the zone map, which governs the land uses that certain properties can be put to. A resolution, in contrast, is a way for the council to exercise the administrative powers that it also has. Because even in our form of government, the council does have some administrative powers. For example, state law requires that certain property purchases or offers for sale of city property, even though that's an administrative action, that the council approve it, and they can do that by resolution. The other thing that they can do by resolution that you see both in city government and on a larger stage in state and federal government is resolutions can be used by elected policymakers such as the council to state a position that they have and to call to action others. And so a resolution can be used to set forth what the council thinks a policy direction for the city should be, what the council believes to be something that, for instance, the state legislature should take action on. There have been several of those that have been passed in the recent past, where the city council has passed a resolution asking the state legislature to take some action. So those resolutions are non-binding and do not change the law, but state what the council's definitive position is.
All right. Any further questions? Thank you, Mr. Jones. We do have a caller. I don't know if this caller is requesting to speak, but we'll pause for, okay, caller 7092. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's me. Aaron Davidson. I'm actually a resident of American Fork, but I work in Provo, and my daughter will be attending BYU here coming in the next couple of weeks. I am a non-mask wearer. I do not wear a mask, but it's for a different reason than other people. I have read many studies. I read the Abbott study. I read some of the references in the Abbott study of other studies. And if you look at them, most of the studies are very clinical. They're done in a clinical environment, and they show that mask wearing for medical healthcare personnel is effective because it's in an environment that's controlled in a pressurized system, in a highly filtered system. But I have sat there and watched people in public and the way that they use masks. And the amount of times that they touch it is just, you get the cross-contamination factor. And I was actually kicked out of Harmon's grocery store two nights ago. Two of the store managers approached me and told me that I could not purchase. I could come in the store, but I could not purchase anything unless I put a mask on. I refused to put a mask on, and so I ended up leaving without my purchases. And while we were sitting there talking for 5 minutes, each of those store managers touched their mask at least 6 times. One was wearing a cloth mask inside out. Don't know if that was because the stitching might have irritated his face or if he just occasionally reversed it for comfort purposes. The other one was wearing a neck gaiter, and it was visibly dirty around the mouth area. So it's not so much that the clinical trials can prove that masks work to help reduce the aerosol sprays, but if you watch people and how they actually use them, there's no possible way that mask wearing can be a positive deterrent of the spread of COVID, because if they are asymptomatic or symptomatic, the amount of times that they're touching, moving it, taking it off, replacing it, using it over and over again, you're introducing more of a problem than solving. So I recommend turning down this resolution and let people do as they feel they needed to, based upon the recommendations that the health departments give them. Thank you.
All right. We'll wait a little longer to see if there are any more public comments. All right. Well, seeing no further calls, we will bring it back to the council for deliberation about the resolution. Any comments or thoughts about the resolution from the council? Mr. Fillmore, could you unmute yourself?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'll go first on the resolution. And I believe the council knows that I was one that pushed for this special session, given the urgency with the college students returning. My focus was on a resolution, however, not necessarily an ordinance that mandates behavior in addition to that. I believe the ordinance is something that remains to be seen for further discussion. But the current resolution, I believe, has been thoroughly reviewed, discussed, amended, revised, and I fully support the current resolution before us.
All right, thank you, Mr. Fillmore. I do note, okay. I'm a little nervous about curtailing the attendees. See one other caller. It's only one other caller, right?
They're in the attendee list, but they haven't *9, so they haven't indicated that they want to talk. Councilor Ellsworth wants to comment, but before you do that, if you give me permission, I just want to refer you to. We had heard from Dr. Ben Abbott on Tuesday, and he met with another doctor who had sent the council members some concerns and disputing some of the evidence that you had. They met today, and Dr. Abbott had sent you a follow-up to the areas where they disagree. And one of the areas they talked about is the use of masks and how effective and ineffective they are. They're still found to be more effective than not wearing them. And there's a lot more detail in the responses that he gave you in your emails.
Thank you. Travis is indicating that somebody is trying to call in, but they're having some difficulties. I don't know if that's. I see another call. Let's maybe just give this a second. If any of these callers would like to press *9, that would help us to know that you wish to speak.
There you
go. So a caller whose number ends in 4806, go ahead. Let's see. I'm trying to unmute, but it's not unmuting. There's always this little glitch. Please bear with us.
Yes, sorry about that. I was struggling to unmute myself. My name is Christine Kaufman, and I'm in Provo. And what concerns me is I support the resolution. And I feel like I appreciate that we are able to speak and share, our thoughts, and I appreciate the care and consideration the council and Mayor Kafusi are taking in this measure. I don't feel at this point in our learning curve of COVID, which is very steep, I feel like at this point we are being careful and not being knee-jerk. But I worry what's happening throughout the world and in the U.S. is we're experiencing the scientific method in real time. And the caller from before spoke about the misuse of masks. And although it certainly does compromise the wearer, and I would be interested to find out, how much, if that wearer is asymptomatic, and we know it's an aerosol pathogen, the rest of us are still being protected by that wearer who may not be doing as great a job with protecting themselves. I just think we need to err on the side of caution. And like I said, our learning curve is steep. And what we know now, we know more than what we did months ago. And I feel the luxury of time to get everybody up to speed and to get everybody to agree to wear a mask. And we just have lost that luxury.
Thank you very much. We'll go to the next caller, which is the number ends in 3265. Go ahead.
Hi, I am a resident of Provo City, and I wear a mask most of the time that I am required to. There are times that I do not. I am not a believer in wearing masks as much as they have been pushed onto people. I am trying to be respectful about it. I do stand with Mayor Kafasi and our police chief in not pushing a mandate, because with everything that is going on in this world, we need to show that we trust each other as a community, especially with law enforcement. And I also just would like to add, I do not understand the focus on this deadly disease that has over a 99% survival rate. Therefore, I do not agree with the mandate, and I think that you should trust your own citizens to make the choice for what is best for them and their family. Thank you.
Please state your name. I'm sorry, I forgot to ask at the beginning.
My name is Nicole
What's your last name?
Candy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. I think that there are other callers calling in, but no one's hand is raised yet. You need to press *9 if you wish to speak. Okay, caller number 4770, go ahead.
And callers, as you come in, please remember to state your name and city of residence.
Okay, thank you. I was muted. My name is Jessica Justino, and I appreciate all the wording in the mandate as it is stated. I feel that many times we are worried about our freedoms with the mask. I feel like this wearing a mask gives us all greater freedom. It allows us not to be more shut down than like we were in the past. A mask allows us to move forward. There's lots of people in our city, in our community, that have health concerns, that they don't feel safe out and about because not everybody's wearing a mask. And I think that gives them a greater sense of security. I think that there is that mid-population of people who are only wearing them some of the time or not at all, who need to be convinced. I think there's also like a social pressure that if you are in a situation where you don't see other people wearing masks, then you're not going to do it. And I feel like that gives us just a little bit more pressure, that so people are wearing masks and so they don't stand out when they wear a mask. And just once again, that we're just all doing this and doing our part to help keep everybody safe and just do our part to tell the virus.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go to caller whose number ends in 1217. Go ahead. There's a bit of a delay when I am able to unmute you. Go ahead.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I'm a Provo resident. My name is Jennifer Stringham. First and foremost, I would like to address the survey that was sent out. I think Karen mentioned the amount of hours that it was posted. I think that is not a representation of the city, the feelings of it's a sliver of what you guys can look at. I think that's not an appropriate amount of time for the survey to be out there. I don't think the majority, what did you say, you had 100 and something responses? With the amount of people that live in the Provo area, who work in the Provo area. Anyway, I think the survey was terrible. I think the questions were misleading, such as the one that says, assuming you agree with the mandate, how would it be enforced? I think that was one of the questions. That question, I don't agree with the mandate, so how do I answer that question? Anyway, so I think we need to be cautious and use extreme caution when we are looking at the results of that survey, with the amount of time that it was out, the amount of time people had to respond, and the number of responses that the council received. Secondly, I've emailed the council members and suggested that masks are being worn. Every store I'm at,
the majority, not 60%, the majority of people are wearing masks. You go in Walmart, you go in Target, you go in the dollar store, you go in Costco. I know Costco's in Orem, but you go in all of these stores, Sam's Club down in East Bay, everybody is wearing masks. Mr. Handley indicated he counts the number of people. He's mentioned that to me, that he regularly counts the amount of people that are wearing masks. I do too, and the majority are wearing them. So I don't think a mandate is needed.
Thank you. Just one quick clarification. The survey results were just under 2,700 responses in just 26 hours. It was much more than a few.
Okay.
Thank
But
you.
27 hours is a terrible amount of time.
All right, thank you. We'll go to the next caller, 4992. Go ahead, 4992.
Hey, my name is Chad Pritchard. I have a business in downtown Provo. I live in Provo, and I've probably talked to most of you already. You know, my view is I don't believe we need a mandate. We wear masks in our business. Most of our customers wear masks. The problem we have with a mandate that is unenforceable or will not be enforced is that it weakens all other laws that you pass. Secondly, it's not needed because as businesses we already respect we respect all of our customers. Most of us aren't gonna kick out customers because they don't have a mask. It just seems like it's a toothless gesture that you're doing so that maybe some people might comply. I understand the argument that as BYU comes back, there's lots of students. That is the demographic, with the exception, I guess, of the party that alerted everybody to this, is wearing masks the most and is fighting masks the most. I'm worried a lot about the negative impacts of businesses who don't require masks or who aren't enforcing them, the negative impact that they'll have on social media and other things when people take pictures and try and do things like that. We had that happen to us earlier this year on social media. It's something that a resolution is great, but why pass a law that is unenforceable or will not be enforced? How are you planning to enforce this law if you pass this law? I think a resolution is fantastic if that's the route you want to go. But there's no necessary reason to do a mandate if there's nothing punitive put forth to enforce the law.
Thank you, Mr. Pritchard. We'll go to the next caller, 2625 are the last four numbers. Go ahead, 2625.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, my name is Mike Preston. I don't actually live in Provo, but the border of Provo and Orem runs right behind my house. I do attend the rec center in Provo and take advantage of that. I would like to say that I am not in favor of a mandate for masks. I go to the rec center 3 or 4 times a week, and I don't wear a mask going into the rec center. It would be very difficult to wear a mask while exercising, I believe, especially when you're playing racquetball. But I agree with Mayor Kafusi and the police chief that this should be a trusted manner into the people. My biggest concern is that if you make a mandate, that it's going to cause such a divisive tone in our community that we're going to have people at each other's throats. I just don't believe that that's the right way to go. I believe that if people want to wear masks and are willing to wear masks, they feel that that's the necessary thing for them to do, then that's fine. I don't agree with wearing a mask. I personally have a health issue that would cause me to convulse and throw up if I had to wear a mask. I have claustrophobia. I believe that my civil rights are being taken away from me by asking me to wear a mask. It's a right. I believe that it's something that you can't take away from me. And there's going to be a great amount of people, no matter whether you pass a mandate or not, and whether it's 60%, 30%, or 25% of the people that agree with it or don't agree with it, those people are going to rise up and say, we're not going to wear a mask. And it's going to go on and on and on. So wearing a mask is just going to, or mandating wearing a mask is just a problem. I also know, because of my wife's health issues, that immune systems are compromised by wearing masks. And that there's a 99% survival rate from this COVID thing. By your own statistics, it says, it's 0.0006% of people that get this disease. So it's ridiculous.
Thank you very much. We need to move on, but thank you. Appreciate it. We'll go to the next caller. And by the way, the beep does mean 2 minutes is up. So that's what I'm referring to. A caller whose number ends in 1798. Please go ahead. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Devaney Roberts. I live in Provo in the Edgemonte neighborhood, and I appreciate all of you. I've emailed you all and really appreciate your replies and what you're doing for our community. Especially thank Mayor Calfusi for her position on everything, and just want to say thank you for that. I just wanted to talk very quickly about the impact of a mandate versus the resolution, and I think a mandate would cause more problems. I kind of agree with people on that too. I just want to share my experience with my daughter today. She had her first day of school at Edgemonte today, and I had her tell me how her experience was when she came home, and she said it was okay, but she was a little bit scared. And I said, why did you feel a little bit scared? And she said, well, I needed to take a few deep breaths. So I put my mask down a little bit, and my teacher immediately made me put it back on my face. She's 8 years old. And I said, they wouldn't let you take a few deep breaths. And she said, no, I had to put it up right away. And I couldn't breathe. And I said, okay, well, it's your right to breathe. So, I emailed the principal and the teachers and just said, if she needed to take a few deep breaths, I would like to make sure that she's allowed to do that. And they also have desks around the Edgemonte. So I just want to let you guys know, I just feel like if we do a mandate, it puts everyone on this hyper alert. But my child, I want her to be able to breathe when she's at school. And if she needs to take a few deep breaths by putting her mask down for a few moments, which I told her a few moments should be fine. I want my kid to feel safe at school and not scared of her teacher. And I want her to be able to breathe. And so I just think if we do a mandate, there will be so much more fear put into our children with the way that they would be, encouraged at school or, to keep their masks on. And if the BYU study says that the child and adolescent is so low risk, let's let our schools be more of a happier, less scary place, and our colleges could be more strict if they are the higher risk. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. All right, caller who ending in 2892. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Carolyn Lambert. I'm a resident of Highland, but spend a lot of time in Provo, and I have a daughter at UVU and several family members who live and work in Provo as well. These decisions affect all of us. I'm concerned because I believe that this is a time to be deliberate and discerning in planning, and that all risks and benefits need to be carefully weighed with health and wholeness at the fore. And because we know at this hour, these are unprecedented circumstances, many unknowns, we need thoughtful caution and care aimed at and exercised as we make decisions. And of course, research and observations would indicate that prudent protective measures, distance, environment, healthy hygiene, masks, and all of these confirmed by science, of course, would most likely positively impact outcomes. And social and personal interaction are important, but health and safety and compassion and concern are really prime priorities. and standards and actions can be adjusted as more is made known and conditions improve, but hastily approaching a potentially problematic course of action is really unwise. I've been studying science for long years, and especially with relation to COVID lately, and my own personal experiences with suffering have caused me to carefully consider a lot of things. A lot of my time's been spent recently poring over research and information and considerations. I've listened to House subcommittee hearings and school board meetings and city council meetings and government and health department briefings and community gatherings and forums and hospital dialogues to gather information, and tried to interface with some of these leaders as well. There are a lot of really difficult decisions that are having to be made, and they're not all driven by data or safety concerns, but some, it seems, by demands and antagonism, funding issues, perceived practicality. They're all real dilemmas, and I have many in my family, many of them children, none of them elderly or apparently outrightly infirmed, who have health challenges, and I'm concerned about everyone. So I would hope that these things can be all considered.
Thank you.
And the potential for serious complications as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll go to caller 1822. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Alice Willow, and I'm a resident of Provo, Utah. I'm calling in to vocally affirm my support for a mask mandate in Provo. All of the evidence we've obtained thus far strongly suggests that a mask mandate will improve both mask wearing in the general public as well as decrease COVID transmissions. This will be incredibly valuable for us to survive as a community, I think. And I am very concerned that people are espousing high-minded ideals like liberty and freedom when it comes to the general safety of the public. We don't allow people to drive drunk, and we shouldn't allow people to go without a mask during a plague. Thank you. That will be all of my time.
Thank you. All right, any other callers who wish to comment? If you wish to, you need to press *9. Caller ending in 8707. Go ahead.
Hi. Yes, my name is Terry Mahaffey, and I am totally against a mandate, and I'll tell you why. I have family in California, and I have family in Michigan, and they have all been forced to wear them everywhere they have gone, and their freedom, whatever you want to call it, taken away, whatever. But the problem is people are still getting it. And it's not that contagious as everybody's making it out to be. For the majority of people, it's a cold, and it lasts about 2 days, and maybe for others, longer. And my nephew got it, and he felt kind of sick for 2 days, and he was fine. Others that were around him never got it. This is just insane what we're doing. What about the deaf child who learns to read lips, who now cannot communicate with people because he can no longer, or she can read anybody's lips? What about the person that was raped and had their mouth covered and smothered while they were raped, and the emotional distress of that feeling of suffocation that they had to go through? What about those that have asthma, that cannot breathe good on their own, and yet you stick a mask on them? Businesses are denying services to even people with disabilities and health issues, and you guys go and mandate it. Those people now have nothing that they can do but stay home and be reclusive And the depression numbers, the risk of suicide. I have a health condition. I am on immune suppressants, and I am not afraid. And you know what? I was around somebody that had it, and I never got it. Never. My son is a nurse. He has 0 cases at his hospital. 0. We're overreacting. Let people choose. Let people make a choice. If somebody wants to wear a mask, I'm totally fine with that. If they're uncomfortable being around somebody that doesn't, then stay your distance, and I'll stay mine. Thank you, Mayor Confuci. I support you.
Can you indicate your city of residence, please?
Provo. I live in Edgemont area.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, we'll go to caller 8850. Go ahead. Go ahead, 8850.
Sorry, I had some problems unmuting. My name is Brigham Daniels. I live in the Tree Streets in Provo. And I just beg you all to think very carefully about the option that is in front of you. With 30,000 BYU students on their way here, and many other UVU students and Ensign College students, we are set for an explosion, and we're not ready for it. These kids are going to be coming from all over the country, and what they bring with them, there will be people in that group. We know that young people are young people, and they really are social. So I think it's highly likely that there's going to be community spread at a level we have not seen. This is the one thing that we can do to protect ourselves from others. This isn't a matter of personal freedom to the extent that all sorts of different things. We limit people's freedom if there is a danger of hurting others. You put restrictions on the way I drive my car for that reason. You put restrictions on a wide range of things for that very reason. And this is literally, I mean, it sounds hyperbolic, but we will have people who die without this. We will. It's unacceptable. And, I don't want to die. I don't want my family to die. I don't want my friends to die. I don't want my neighbors to die. I don't want my students to die. This is the one thing that we can do. And I realize that not everybody likes to wear the mask. I don't like to wear it myself, but putting a simple piece of cloth in front of our face could save us a lot of pain. And I just ask you to seriously consider adopting a mandate. Thank you.
All right, we'll go to caller 1465. Go ahead. See, I don't seem to be able to caller 1465.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So my name is Quentin Anderson. I live in the Woking neighborhood. I'm a UVU student. I volunteer at schools for the semester as per one of my requirements for the program I'm in. And I just want to start by asking, what is the value of a life? Schools are restarting. We need to do the very best to prevent the spread of COVID. It's obvious. Like I said, I volunteer at a school. As per regulations, all students need to wear a mask. This is pretty easy. I've worked with these kids. They're having a little bit of issues covering up their nose when they're wearing a mask. Of course, that's simple stuff, but they are trying, and none of them are having issues breathing. I understand specific issues where it may be hard, but that is the rare, super rare exception. And this is obvious to me. We need to protect our residents, do what we can to protect our residents. In Salt Lake City, cases have dropped. We know this. I looked it up right before I called in, and July 9th, there was 864 cases of COVID-19. Recently, it was about 250. Do we want to protect our citizens who live here, who are day to day, or do we just want to save freedom? I believe, personally, my freedom to live a happy, healthy life is way more important than the simple freedom of not wearing a mask in a literal pandemic. So I believe it's obvious, and I want to end my call by supporting it and asking what is the value of life. And thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, we'll go to caller whose number ends 8437. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, 8437. Go ahead.
Hi, I want to respond to the person whose daughter goes to Edgemont Elementary. My name is Angela Falconer, and I live in the Edgemont North neighborhood. And so hearing about another mother with a child in the school system, she was talking about how her child is afraid because she has to wear a mask. And I felt empathy for that because I too have a child, but we're dealing with fear in the other direction where my daughter is anxious to be back in school and seeing people not wearing masks properly. I think both of us have to work with our children to educate them about how to think about this. You know, her daughter can learn that it is possible to get breaths through a mask. My daughter can learn, oh, if you see someone taking a couple of breaths outside their mask, it's probably not a crisis. At BYU, masks weren't required until very recently. And I just saw kind of the power of a mandate. I don't really think they're hunting people down at BYU and citing them or jailing them or fining them if they don't wear masks. So I think it's similar, the effect on the BYU campus, to what it would be in Provo with no enforcement. And what I've seen is a huge change. Just a month ago, most people weren't wearing masks. And now on campus, almost every single person you see is wearing a mask. It makes me feel safer. I know for some people it's hard. Well, actually, no. For all of us, it's hard because nobody likes wearing a mask. Someone else talked about being claustrophobic, and I could relate. I've been trying to practice climbing the 4 floors to my building at BYU instead of taking the elevator in a mask, and it was hard. But I think when we look at all the thousands of students coming back, they need this. Thanks.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll go to caller 8496. Go ahead. (8496), go ahead.
Okay, I think I'm here. Hi, my name is Matt Peterson. I'm a Provo resident. I just need to say I'm troubled by the repeated appeal to 99% survival rate, which carries with it an implication that we shouldn't take extraordinary measures to protect our citizens from a contagious disease in our midst because only 1 out of 100 who become ill will die. That's not acceptable to me. I would also point out to the previous caller who concerns about how her child is treated in school that a mask mandate would not impose any new restrictions in the classroom, where there's already a strict mask requirement as issued by the governor. With a high-risk individual in our own household, the school mask mandate was in fact the deciding factor that allowed us to let our son return to the classroom. Mask wearing won't just protect each of us, but will also increase economic activity as more places outside the home became safer for those of us who have higher risk individuals in our household, allowing us to do more local shopping. Additionally, as another previous caller explained, people will die in proportion to the degree that we do not adequately take the appropriate protective measures. The decision about whether to mandate masks or not is a deliberate choice regarding the level of loss of life that we will tolerate. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to caller 1790. Go ahead. Yes.
Hello, hi, my name is Thad Brown, resident of Provo. I won't take too long, and I appreciate this opportunity, but this is such a no-brainer to me. There absolutely should be a mask mandate. I mean, science is science. There's no argument for not doing this. I mean, it's unconstitutional. Personal freedom thing is kind of laughable. That's all I have to say about it, but I strongly support of a mask mandate. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to caller 0690. Go ahead. Zero 0690.
Yes, hi. Sorry, I was muted there and I didn't realize it. Hi, my name's Peter Madsen. I live in Provo. I live in the Edgemonte neighborhood, and I'm a professor at BYU. And I wanted to voice my support, as many of the other callers have, for a mask mandate in Provo. BYU will have a mask mandate on campus, at least in buildings on campus, this fall, as the public schools will as well. And those are good measures, but there's very good evidence that wearing a mask reduces spread of COVID-19. And I would feel much more comfortable about myself and my family members being out in our community if we could be confident that other members of the community would wear masks. I see this as a public health issue. We require people to wear seatbelts because they'll be safer. It's not an issue of personal freedom. It's an issue of protecting public health and safety. And I see this exactly the same way. We're going to have, as others have mentioned, we're going to have about 30,000 BYU students coming to town over the next couple of weeks. Some of them will bring additional infections of COVID-19 with them, and they will wear a mask on campus, but if they're not required to off campus, many of them won't. And if we make this requirement, we don't have to penalize people who don't wear masks. We don't have to slap heavy penalties on people, but if we just make this a requirement, many more people will wear masks who wouldn't otherwise. So I think it's a necessary step at this point of this unusual time in our history. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll go to caller ending in 8550. Go ahead.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, my name is Tara Bishop. I'm an Orem resident who works in Provo. And I just wanted to kind of add my say to the idea that a mask mandate or a resolution, just something to help educate the public and get more confidence in the community that masks are a good idea and that they're supported by our local leaders. We, as I said before, we've got all of these college students that are going to be coming in from all over the place. And, as a community, we value preventative care. And, we take our kids to get their well checks, and we do things for ourselves that are uncomfortable as far as preventative care with things like mammograms and colonoscopies, right? And they're awful, but we do them because it's the better choice to get ahead of things rather than try and fix them from a post-problem situation. And so if we can, instill this mask mandate now where, in 6 months from now, maybe we're looking back and being like, maybe it wasn't necessary, but which would you rather be in that position, or 6 months from now and having hundreds of citizens die or be ill for some period of time with potential long-lasting effects and thinking, man, could we have done more, right? And so it's right now we're kind of at this pivot point, and I appreciate the speed at which you guys are putting this together and trying to, ask these.
Somehow all participants just got muted. I apologize. Go continue.
Are you still there? Sorry.
We'll give you a little extra.
I think, okay, I don't have you on YouTube anymore, so I didn't know if I ran up my time. I didn't hear it, but I just wanted to reiterate that I appreciate you guys really trying to ask these important questions, and I just really feel that we want to be on the side of caution and preventing death, and because all of our citizens matter, that their lives are important, and we want to value those lives.
All right.
So thank you.
All right, we'll go to caller 6862. I remind you, if you push *6, you should be able to unmute.
*9.
No, *6.
Okay, can you hear me?
Oh, *6. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so my name is Jaron Petrich. I'm a Provo City resident. I also work at BYU, so I work in Provo as well. And I am opposed to the mask mandate, mostly because I believe in the goodness of our community. I know that people can make good choices for themselves. I really don't feel like the government needs to step in and mandate something like this. I think there are a myriad reasons why this constitutes a slippery slope of governmental overreach, both in the medical realm as well as into personal sovereignty. And what I don't want to see is this being a turning point where the government, and once again, I appreciate all that you guys do locally here, but I think that local is where we have the most power to set precedent and to make positive or negative choices and changes in the way that government will behave in the future. And I just really feel strongly that we need to consider the angle of letting people use their agency and, social distancing and mask wearing aside. I think that we need to consider the implications long term of what a decision like a mask mandate will do. And I guess I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, caller 8128. Go ahead. You can press *6 to unmute. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Faith Buttrick. I live in Syracuse, Utah, but I travel to Provo to see family, eat down there. I frequent there and buy business, while I'm with my family. I am just calling to reiterate what a lot of people have said. We all know what matters in the court of law is facts of law. And the facts of law are that our inherent inalienable rights trump any code or statute passed. Okay? A lot of people are coming to realize that this thing is not what it was made out to be. Okay? There's a lot of studies that show that fabric masks, which are 95% of what I see, actually increase the rate of upper respiratory infections. And this is a problem. People have been coming in with bacterial and fungal infections in their lungs, in their throat, on their face. This is a problem, especially for little children who are being forced to wear them as an experiment at the dictate of bureaucrats. That's not okay. Our medical freedom was established a long time ago. It's an inalienable right, an unalienable right. You cannot put a lien on that right, which means I have the freedom to breathe as a free person in America. That's a normal thing. There is no new normal. So I want you to have full disclosure that you guys are violating your oath to the Constitution, which is the original contract that was made for you guys to even exist, okay? Going outside the bounds of that contract is not right. It is a breach of our freedom and our natural rights, which do trump the Constitution, and it trumps any code or statute that you guys put in place or any type of mandate. I have hundreds of studies that show that masks cause more harm. If you guys want me to share them with you, I'm more than happy to email them to you. But what matters is the facts of law, and you guys need to recognize that.
All right, thank you. I want to just announce that we have heard from many hundreds of people on the Open City Hall. We've received almost 200 emails. We want to hear from everyone tonight, but we do want to get on to our discussions. So I see the last number. I'm going to sort of draw an artificial line here. I don't know that all the hands are up, but if the last caller on my list is 3378, that's where I'm going to stop our public comment so that we can move on. We do appreciate all the public comment, and I apologize, but we want to be able to reserve some time for our discussion. So we'll go to caller 1444. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm a resident of Provo. I'm a professor, here at BYU. I work and live in Provo. My concern with this mandate, it goes beyond what we're talking about in terms of medical or political. It's gotten to the point where we have a new state of emergency declared by the governor. We have mask mandates by almost all businesses in the Provo area. So in some respect, it seems like we're looking to talk about a mandate. We're looking to propose something that's really irrelevant. Campuses at BYU requires a mask and random testing and having an app that tracks your whereabouts. And so, or that tracks your how close you get to somebody else who is a student or a professor or an employee at BYU. We're already doing all of those things as private enterprises or as private businesses or at the state level. It seems like we're just wasting time to do this at the city level. It doesn't seem like it's a relevant thing for us to even talk about or have to argue about. But the biggest concern that I have is we're continually looking for ways to insert ourselves in people's lives in a way that is unnecessary. If somebody doesn't feel comfortable going to an establishment that doesn't require masks, then don't go. There aren't critical services, businesses that don't require masks. You can't go to the doctor without a mask. You can't go to the grocery store without a mask. You can't go to Walmart without a mask, or Home Depot or Lowe's. Some of them will let you in. Most of them will require you to have a mask, and they give you one when you walk in the door. And if you don't feel comfortable, they will bring whatever you want out to your car. So we're talking about a mandate for something that is unnecessary at the city level.
Could you please state your name? Oh, whoops. I think we lost him. So I didn't catch his name. All right, we'll go to caller 1816. Go ahead. Hello.
Good evening. Hello, am I connected?
Yes.
All right, thank you. My name is Jim Tracy. I live in Provo. Just retired from a law enforcement career, 41 years. My concern and request to the council to consider is the issue of a resolution of support versus something that's a mandate or an ordinance. The issue that I have is the issue of if there is a mandate that is made, it is basically worthless without enforcement. Requiring enforcement of what is ostensibly a health issue by law enforcement is ill-advised. And it would end up placing the Provo police in what I would believe is an untenable situation and foster further resentment at a time when there is already concern about public trust within law enforcement. So as far as I'm concerned, I wear a mask when I'm out in public. I don't have any issue with a support resolution, but I would highly request that the council consider not making a mandate, and that if that mandate is made, that the enforcement go through code enforcement for a health department and not the law enforcement of the Provo Police. Really, that's all I had to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll go to caller 3779. Press *6 to unmute. There you go.
Hi, my name is Austin Simcox. I live and work in Provo as a high school teacher. I am calling in to show my total support for a mask mandate. And that is because I believe that government exists to protect everyone's freedom and not just some people's freedom. No one is saying that a mask mandate will be easy, but the data shows that it will be effective, even if it's not enforced. This is a simple solution backed by data, and when making policy decisions, data should trump emotion. There will always be exceptions, and we should, of course, have empathy for those situations and do our best to make accommodations. But I don't think that we should put the entire community at higher risk because of a few exceptions. A lot of people have been saying that we should just allow people to make good decisions on their own, but we've been trying that approach for months and it's not working. We will soon have a large influx of students coming from all over the country at the same time as our schools reopening, which means that our risk as a community is about to skyrocket. We can mitigate that through a mask mandate. I want to get back to normal as soon as possible, and the best way to do that and the best way to protect our economy and our health is by wearing masks. Thank you for opening this discussion, and I hope that you will implement a mask mandate.
Thank you. All right, we'll go to caller 9938. Go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Eleanor Smith. I'm a high school student here in Provo, and I am strongly in favor of a mask mandate. I know a lot of people are saying that if you ask people in the community to wear a mask, they will most likely comply, and from what I've seen, that is not the case. I know at my high school, there are kids who won't wear their masks unless teachers explicitly tell them that they have to, and unless there are consequences for students who do not wear their masks. I think that just asking people is not enough, and so we really need to implement a citywide mandate. I know that a lot of people are arguing that by having a mandate in place, that will take away some of our liberties, but really, if we don't have our health, then what liberties do we have? Because in order to make life decisions, we have to have our health, and we want to be a healthy community. We want it to be safe and accepting for everyone. And I know I don't want my friends or family members to suffer. I don't want our whole community to suffer. I just want things to get back to normal. I want us to be as safe and responsible as citizens as we can possibly be. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, caller 2665, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Hannah Falconer, and I'm a BYU student. I just checked into my campus housing on Tuesday, and in fact, people have been checking into campus housing since Saturday, so I think that shows how urgent this issue is. BYU students are already moving in, and I'm worried because I have a lot of wonderful friends who I know care about protecting others, but they don't really take mask mandates seriously. And I think mask mandates are like all sorts of other laws that we have. We have speeding laws. We tell people not to litter. Why do we have these rules? It's because we care about protecting people. We have speeding laws because we don't want people to crash into other people because they've been driving too fast. I know when I see a speed limit sign, that changes my behavior, even if I don't think a police officer is about to arrest me for speeding or give me a speeding ticket. And I think we should really pay attention to the data. The BYU study that was shared at the other town hall had numbers that were so shocking about just how much masks could help. And I think we should care about this. We should care about how much it's going to affect our community. And we should realize that really, as has been said, people won't necessarily wear masks just because we ask them to. But if we tell them that it's a mandate and we explain why it's so important, then the BYU study showed that the amount of mask compliance would greatly increase. And so I hope that we'll have a mask mandate, and I'm strongly in favor of it because I know that it will help people understand how serious of an issue this is, and it will help us all protect each other's rights to a healthy life. I work And at my work, masks aren't required. They're encouraged, but just because they're encouraged doesn't mean everyone wears one. So I'm a little bit worried about getting coronavirus because I work at a call center and lots of people don't wear masks there. So I think that illustrates just how important a mask mandate is.
Thank you. All right, caller 9250. Go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, sorry. I may have
Okay.
muted you.
That's all right. My name is Blake Tierney. I live and work in Provo. Thanks for having this open forum and listening to everyone. I think the surveys and calls have been really interesting to hear. I will say there have been quite a few anecdotes and opinions and frankly some misinformation. But I think it's pretty easy that we should just listen to the science. The science tells us over and over that masks are effective. Countless studies and data has shown that, including information from Provo's own BYU, as well as data we've seen out of Salt Lake County after their mask mandate, and the fact that their growth rate of the virus has been lower than Utah counties since they issued the mandate, despite being a more densely populated area. The concerns about breathing in a mask, I would encourage folks to look up on YouTube and look at all the doctors and nurses who've posted videos of them breathing in a mask. You can have 100% blood oxygen level with a mask on for hours on end, and it has zero impact on your oxygen. So I understand that people may have concern about it when they don't understand it, but if you look at how masks actually work, and if you try one on, you can understand it actually has zero impact on your ability to breathe. And then a lot of folks brought up this 99% number. As someone else mentioned, 1% failure might be okay on a test, but it's not okay when you're talking about life and death. If everyone got it here, 1% mortality would mean 1,000 deaths in Provo and 600,000 dead in Utah County. I personally know 2 people who've died from this virus, and they were both friends of mine, and I don't want anyone to have to go through that. So tonight, each of you has the ability to cast a vote and literally save the lives of people in Provo. It won't be perfect. It'll be temporary. This isn't forever, but you can save lives. And as someone else said, I think it's a no-brainer. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Last hand up is 7861. Go ahead.
Hi, I want to thank you all for taking the time to hold this meeting for us. My name is Marin, and I am a BYU student, and I'll be returning to campus in the next week or so. I want to give my support for a mask mandate. I appreciate the effort that the university has gone to help make it safe for us to return to school, and I'd love to return to school for as long as possible. However, I know that the spread of the virus is not going to happen on campus. It's primarily going to happen off campus. And with having friends and social outings, it can spread really quickly. I feel like a mask mandate would be helpful so that we have the same standards across the board with this population influx that the city might be seeing here in the next few weeks. Masks are a really easy way to help prevent the spread from us to somebody else, even when we don't know that we're sick. And it has never really hurt anybody to wear a mask. It's a simple way that we can show that we care about somebody else. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but at least we've been able to try. So I would like to express my support for a mandate. And thank you again for your time.
Thank you. I did say 3378 would be our last caller, and they have raised their hand. So go ahead, last call.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Betsy Croft, and I am a resident in West Provo. I was calling to pretty much show my support for this mandate. I appreciate that this has been put onto the table for the council and for hopefully the mayor to consider and to ultimately put through. I think it's fair to say at this time that we're past the point of debating the science. I think that we understand now that the mask wearing is not so much about protecting the self as much as it is to protect others. So this is really an act of compassion that we need to require. At this point, I would also like to say that I don't appreciate that this has been made a matter of trust, because in order to have a true trusting relationship, it needs to go both ways. And Provo thus far has given people plenty of chances to prove their end of the bargain, and they just not have met their end of that. I want to make the council aware that I was recently made aware of a upcoming dance party by the same organization that threw a party earlier, the Young and Dumb organization. They're planning to throw a party on September 4th. And so this kind of a thing is going to show no signs of stopping unless we do something and show leadership. So it's important right now that we take decisive action and give our citizens a chance to make it out of this this pandemic safely and alive. We cannot take any more risks, and the time is well past due to act and to show leadership and to show that we care. This really is an act of compassion, and all of the evidence supports it. So I would ask that we please move forward and make this mandate happen. It behooves us to show our concern for each other and not just for ourselves. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. All right. Well, that will conclude our public input. We appreciate all those who have participated. We're grateful for your input and for your patience with the online format. We know it's a little unusual and different, but it seems to have worked well tonight without too many difficulties. So we'll bring it back to the council for discussion. I think there was a hand before I went back to the public comment, but maybe that's changed now. So I'll just welcome anyone who would like to speak up on the council. Ms. Ellsworth, go ahead.
Yeah, I just have a question for staff, really. What would they perceive as the major differences in implementation or enforcement with a resolution versus an ordinance?
Yes. That's a great question, and I got tapped by George, but I'm not sure that I really can answer that question, because enforcement at the end of the day is not really about what it says; it's about who's going to do it, and I don't. So I guess I can say this: in a resolution, there is no one tasked to do it. And in an ordinance, there is theoretically someone tasked to do it, but it is up to the executive branch's discretion whether they actually do it or not. And it's an open question that we have not yet addressed about what the ordinance will say about what the enforcement options are. So I don't know much more that I can say about it than that without kind of maybe a more concrete question, or without looping in others about what the practical logistics of enforcement.
Ms. Ellsworth, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, my next question is just a point of order. Are we going to decide between an ordinance and a resolution? Should we only consider the resolution right now? What do you prefer, Mr. Handley?
Well, right now we're discussing the resolution. We can turn to the question of the ordinance when we're done with that. I mean, if you're asking my personal feeling, I am hoping that we can pass both. I think a resolution without an ordinance may not have as much teeth and traction as I would like to really move the needle on greater levels of compliance. But I know that one thing that's been kind of a sticky issue for all concerned is, what kinds of enforcement are going to be available to us in either case or in both cases, and what kind of effectiveness we can expect. All I know is that most of the research I've read seems to indicate that the most potent combination is an ordinance with an aggressive educational campaign. Cliff?
Might I step in and just characterize? When I think about a resolution, I think about, in this context, a call to action versus an ordinance, which gives us, which gives some direction in law and potentially an enforcement measure, whether it be a civil penalty or whatever, versus say a public health order, which I think is a much more direct mandate, usually issued on some kind of emergency basis. But right now, the resolution you're talking about really is a call to action by the community to step up compliance with the state-stated public health guidelines. It's asking for businesses to be more proactive in terms of educating and requiring masks in their businesses and the public spaces. It's asking the mayor to do more to enhance an already vigorous education campaign on masking. And it's asking people to be sensitive and concerned and caring and engage in good citizenship, essentially. So it's more of a moral call to order than it is a mandate. And that's how I'd characterize the differences.
Mr. Shipley.
Yeah, so for me, I think most of the callers are speaking to the mandate, right? So for me and our discussion right now, I think we should focus on the resolution, which is to encourage and educate, and then move on to the mandate discussion and make them two separate things. So for myself, and I'll just speak for myself on the resolution itself. A few weeks ago at a work meeting, I suggested that to be consistent with what the state has already done, and also now what Orem has done, that I would strongly encourage our administration to require masks at all public facilities, at all Provo-owned buildings, at all Provo-owned properties, with of course the same exceptions that the state has in certain circumstances. I think at a minimum that shows a little bit of leadership to say, look, in our own properties, we require it, just like BYU is saying in their property, just like the LDS Church is saying in church, just like many businesses are saying on their property. I think that's the least we need to do right away, and I think this resolution speaks to that. On the question of a broader mandate, again, I think I think that's a separate topic. But for this specific resolution, I'm highly in favor, and I hope that we can show our strong support for the guidelines that the state has already put out, that we're just not following to a degree to make them effective. So that's my thought.
Mr. Sewell. Whoops, you're muted.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to say that I strongly support what Councillor Shipley just said. Actually, everything he just said, but I do think that we should be setting an example in our own city buildings, like we're encouraging the businesses to do. And well, I won't repeat what he said on that, but I support it. I'd like to thank the mayor and the administration and our excellent communications team for taking the lead these last few months on the messaging and getting the word out and encouraging following all the health guidelines. I'd like to thank my fellow counselors who are very concerned about this issue and have brought this forward for us to discuss both of these options. And I'd like to thank council staff who've just been amazing at the speed that they've worked to put all this together, the draft, resolution draft, the open city hall topic, and all of that. And I also wanted to say that I really appreciate all the residents who have spoken up on this issue. It's just been a great experience for me to read through and now listen to all these different perspectives on this issue and the heartfelt and sincere comments. So thank you. One of the things that occurred to me when we had this party that we've talked about, and one of the things that bothered me was not only the way that it was endangering the health of the community, but the fact that the organizer basically said that Provo City was okay with it. And in a technical sense, I think that's true because we don't have any law or order that would prohibit that kind of activity. And then I got to thinking that the mayor is kind of the voice of the city, and she has the opportunity to speak all the time on her position. But as counselors, we get to comment a little bit in meetings, and we get to pass laws and so forth. But we don't really get the opportunity to speak formally and officially as a group very often. And so I appreciate this opportunity tonight. I'm strongly in favor of this statement and resolution and the opportunity to speak and tell our residents how we feel about this and encourage them and ask them to do the things that are in this resolution. So I'm very supportive.
I quite like the way you've put that, Mr. Sewell. I do find myself in strong agreement with everything that's in the resolution and would like to pass it tonight. I think the urgency of getting that message out to the community is very, very high. Said this before, but the virtually everything we know about disease prevention on something like COVID-19 is that the earlier that we intervene, the better in terms of what can happen when spikes occur. And knowing that we're days away. I mean, BYU students are already arriving. UVU students are already arriving. So we're already too late, I think. So I would just urge us all as a council to pass this, hopefully unanimously tonight, to send that strong message. And then I, would like to discuss what options remain for us with regard to an ordinance. Sorry, Ms. Ellsworth.
Yeah, in terms of the resolution, I think it's a good first step. It seems like a late first step. It seems like the minimum that we could do that I think we probably should have considered months ago. But I think it is an appropriate first step. I would like to see something with a little more teeth in it, like you said, Mr. Handley. I'd like to show the citizens of Provo that we value public health, that we value individual health, and that we value the local economy. And I think it's going to take more than a resolution. But I do support this resolution, and I really appreciate the staff who have worked tirelessly throughout the week to support us in this endeavor. And not just this week, but every week. And not just the staff who works for the council, but all of the employees of the city. I know that they're going above and beyond to do their jobs in the best possible way, and I really appreciate them.
Mr. Sewell.
I did neglect to say one thing. I wanted to express appreciation for the extremely cooperative relationship that the two branches of government have had these past few years, which has been unprecedented in the time that I've been watching. And I wanted to ask the mayor if she had any concerns. I mean, I know the ordinance discussion is still to come, but at this point with the resolution as to what the council is contemplating saying with our legislative voice, do you have any concerns about what we're proposing to say? And I would just be interested in knowing what those were if you did have some.
No, thank you, Councilmember Sewell. I appreciate it, and I respect this resolution and respect the time and effort that you put into it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Fillmore. Unmute. I'm going to just say unmute when
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I would move that we adopt the resolution.
All right. Do we have a second on that? Mr. Sewell, seconds. Okay. Mr. Hoban has a hand up. Is there any discussion of the motion? I don't know, Mr. Hoban, if your comments are extreme, or do you want to speak first and then we'll have a discussion of the motion? Go ahead. For some reason, you're also muted. And now we see the white dots bouncing. Are you still muted? Okay, we don't seem to have any sound at all. Hopefully you can get that resolved. We want to hear from you. If for no other reason, I know you're going to say something that's going to make me laugh. So at least I hope so. All right, so we have a motion. Do we have any discussion of the motion? All right, then I will call for a vote on the motion. I'll begin with myself. I'll vote yes. Mr. Fillmore, you're muted.
Yes.
Mr. Hoban. Mr. Hoban, can you give us a thumbs up maybe? Can he not hear us? We seem to have some technical difficulties with Mr. Hoban. Mr. Shipley?
Yes.
Ms. Ellsworth?
Yes.
Okay. Just check to see if he can give us a vote.
I'm back. So we're sorry, I lost audio there for a bit.
No problem.
We're voting to approve the resolution, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
Everyone's voted, but now you. Okay. So did I actually?
Mr. Sewell, I think you may have missed.
Out of order completely. Mr. Sewell.
Yes.
So the voting is unanimous with Mr. Harding excused. Mr. Hoban, did you want to make a comment?
I think my comment can be made during the discussion for the ordinance. I was just going to voice my support for the resolution and some concerns regarding the ordinance.
All right.
But we can get my comments in a minute.
Perfect. Okay, so we'll turn to the consideration of an ordinance related to COVID-19 pandemic responses, including face coverings and public gatherings. And Brian, discuss that. Mr. Fillmore, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, although I fully support the resolution we just passed, and although I share a sense of urgency in light of 60,000 college students now returning to Provo, I've come to the conclusion recently that to adopt an ordinance tonight would be a bit premature. Any compulsory ordinance requiring masking, given the current scientific and philosophic controversies involved, I believe merits further study and input from our local schools, from our businesses, and perhaps an extended survey. Accordingly, I would move that we table any vote on an ordinance tonight while still having a good discussion on the key issues, and that that we move expeditiously then to bring before the council for a vote an appropriate ordinance that is limited, non-criminal, and surgically addresses only the highest risk situations.
All right, is there a second on that motion? Mr. Sewell? Any discussion? I'd like to actually comment on the motion for a moment.
Just to clarify, that was a second by Mr. Sewell, or?
Yes, that was.
Okay, thank you.
I am in favor of the motion, but not with what I heard were more editorial comments that I know they're your strong feelings and convictions, which of course are relevant here. But I'm just a little worried that passing a motion like this means that we're agreeing with you that with everything else you said. Regarding the value of the ordinance. I mean, if the motion is that we table the discussion of the specific ordinance draft and the vote on that draft until such further time as we are satisfied with that draft and ready to make that vote, I'm in favor. But if the motion is that there are that we're agreeing to the reservations you've expressed about an ordinance, then I'm not in favor.
For the sake of collegiality and moving this along, Mr. Chairman, I'll agree to your amendment to my motion.
Ms. Ellsworth?
Yeah, Mr. Fillmore referenced scientific controversies, and I'm curious what he's referencing.
Well, I just would reference the dozens and dozens of letters we've received and some disagreements by people in the healthcare industry. I personally am persuaded by the medical evidence that has brought us to this point, but there are still a good many people who don't agree with that. More to the point is the philosophical differences that we see in all the emails. I just think we benefit from having more input, particularly from our local businesses. And I think it would benefit us to extend the survey.
Mr. Sewell, go ahead.
And I just wanted to clarify my thoughts on seconding this. First of all, I was so busy reading all the emails this afternoon from all of our constituents that I haven't actually even looked at the ordinance draft. And so in my experience trying to edit and pass an ordinance on the dais is a very not a good idea. Let's just put it that way. So I do think we need a little bit more time so that we can prepare for that. And I know that the mayor and the police chief have expressed strong reservations about an ordinance, but I would like to also include them in this dialogue and see if there's some way that we could find some middle ground there that would not be overly burdensome on enforcement and that sort of thing. I think it's at least worth a try.
And I can say amen to that. Thank you, Mr. Sewell.
Ms. Ellsworth.
Yeah, I think that the ordinance has value, and I think that we could pass it tonight, and we could put a sunset period on it for 3 weeks, for 4 weeks, and then reevaluate with more data. That would be preferable to me, because I think if we wait another week and a half for our next council meeting, and then it's continued again, and then it's continued again, we're not going to create an effective safety precaution for the citizens. It'll just be too late.
Mr. Hoban, or Mr. Bracken, do you want to clarify?
First, it would be helpful to have a restatement of the actual motion for staff so we can have it correctly stated. The question of whether to continue, whether to actually have the discussion tonight or go through it and maybe vote on it may depend on your understanding of what's in it. And so I think right now, the motion more or less is to either discuss it tonight and vote on it, or not to.
Well, that Mr.
Mr.
Fillmore indicated a desire, or at least a willingness, to talk at sort of a level of principles and ideals with regard to the ordinance tonight, if I heard that correctly. So it wasn't to curtail the conversation entirely, but that we would not vote on the draft, and we would not be doing, as Mr. Sewell just said, kind of editing on the fly.
That's correct.
Mr. Hoban? We can get a restatement of the motion in just a minute. I just, go ahead, Mr.
Hoban. Yeah, so I agree with Mr. Fillmore. I would like, so I guess I agree with the motion of discussing it and then kind of waiting on the vote. However, I don't want to wait too long on the vote. In fact, I think even if we just discuss it or do some more research and get some more input, especially from businesses, I do think 2,800 responses is a pretty good response rate to give us enough of an idea of what the citizens are thinking, the two sides of the issue, or the multiple facets and sides of the issue, I guess I should say. So, but I do think I'd like to take a little bit of time to get some feedback from the businesses, from the chamber. You know, there's some questions I had around BYU's response and how they're planning to curtail off-campus events that I would still like to get some more information on before voting. And then, of course, I think I'll echo what some of the others have said about trying to find something that the mayor and chief and administration are more comfortable with, whether it be a different mandate, a different ordinance, or whatever it might be. So I would be supportive of the motion to not vote tonight, but I don't want to wait, 10 days before we visit this again. As a caller mentioned, there might be another young and dumb party coming up, September 4th. I can't verify that, but I would agree that there are probably events coming up that we need to have made a decision at least on whether or not there's going to be some sort of mandate for large events or things like that, mask mandate at large events. So I don't know if we want to put a timeline on how long we're delaying this, but I would say, we need to be having meetings before 10 days from now. And so I would push for something sooner than the next council meeting. I don't know if that's out of line, but I don't know if it's another emergency meeting or what it might be, but we need to make progress quickly, either to decide yay or nay, so that we all can act accordingly, one way or the other.
And I would certainly be in favor of that. I would amend my motion accordingly. I believe we can call special meetings, again, like we have for this meeting today. We don't have to wait till September.
Mr. Jones, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. If I could make a point of order before the motion gets restated, because I think it may affect the restatement. We often have a it's quite customary because of the powers of the council chair and the way that this council operates. It's fairly customary to make motions to postpone or delay something without specifying when it's going to come back. And usually, as a rule of procedure, that's not an issue because usually that's at the end of all of the debate over the main issue. But I wanted to clarify one thing about the rules of procedure that may come into play here, which is that if Mr. Fillmore's motion is to postpone to a time certain, if he picks a date and says, let's postpone to that time, then debate on the motion may only discuss the merits of postponement and not the underlying item. If instead his motion is to postpone indefinitely, to just postpone to whatever time it may be brought back before the council, the debate over the motion may include discussion of the item itself. So I wanted to raise that because of one of the comments that Mr. Strachan made a minute ago, and just so that everybody understands, and to inform Mr. Fillmore's choice as he restates the motion.
Mr. Jones, can the motion be modified to leave the return to a council meeting in the discretion of the chairman?
I mean, I think you can do that. In my mind, I think that is a motion to postpone indefinitely, which then opens up debate on the underlying ordinance itself, not just on the motion.
Well, I don't know. This feels like a technicality that might be a moot point because the motion included a discussion of the ordinance. That is the principles of it and the merits of the idea of an ordinance, so that we could make some progress tonight, at least in terms of figuring out how much common ground we have on what we would like to see in there or what we would not like to see in there. And if I am, as chair, able to appoint a time, I certainly agree that if we're going to delay this, it cannot be longer than 1 week. I would hope that we could meet at least by next Thursday. And that would give us time to pass something before school is in session, at least at BYU. UVU will be starting on Monday.
And I appreciate that point you're making about the motion, including discussion. And so my point was not to say that one of those options might mean that there is no discussion at all of the ordinance tonight. The point, as a point of procedure, it simply means when that discussion takes place. So in other words, if it's a motion to postpone to a time certain, for instance, next Tuesday or 1 week from today, then there could be no debate about the underlying merits of the ordinance before the motion was voted on. But after the motion to postpone was voted on, then you could have discussion about the ordinance. Alternatively, if you postpone indefinitely, debate about the underlying merits of the ordinance could occupy the entire discussion before the vote is even taken on the motion to postpone.
All right, Ms. Ellsworth.
Yeah, I'm not sure who mentioned that they wanted more survey responses. I'm not sure how that would work, if we would open up the same survey again, or if we would create a new survey and expect citizens to take a new, different, also long survey. This survey it's not scientific, but it has really high returns. And what I was kind of discouraged by the last time we asked the council to create a survey was that there was a controversial issue. We said, hey, let's get a survey from the citizens. Let's figure out, what their ideas are. And then when that survey data came back, it seemed like people discredited the survey results. So I'm hesitant to promote surveys when we would also discredit the results.
If I might respond to that, Ms. Ellsworth, it was I who suggested reopening the survey. And my intent was not to create a new one. It was to reopen the existing survey, which seemed to me to be a pretty decent survey, and just give more citizens a chance to respond to it, since it has been relatively short notice.
Will the council accept the survey results as, again, not necessarily scientific, but as a rough understanding of sentiment in the community?
I think we accept it as helpful to the extent that we find credibility with it.
Well, how do we define credibility with surveys? How can we create a credible survey?
It's a bit subjective, but I'm just saying it's a helpful guide.
Yeah, Cliff definitely wants to say something.
Let me suggest this. When we do the open city hall surveys or questionnaires or however we phrase it at the time, what we're looking for is some guidance based on the comments received, try and get a feel for what people are thinking. One of the ways, we don't often talk about it with you, but one of the ways the company that markets that program is as a means of gathering public input. And we typically calculate the value of that public input is if we had an hour and a half of comments tonight, 28 people called in and spoke to the council about their opinions. The advantage of Open City Hall is that we gathered in 26 hours, nearly 2,700 opinions. And I think the number that Karen gave me earlier is that had we translated all those comments into time in front of the council, it would have been close to 90 hours of testimony. And so really it's just getting a lot of difference of opinion. It helps us collect it and better understand it. And that's the value. It should in no way be considered as, hey, the citizens are voting on this unless we're telling them that we're asking them to vote on something. In this case, they're just giving us their opinions and we're tabulating them and trying to understand the data, and that's helpful just as much as getting 200 emails or 28 people or 188 people speaking in front of the council. So I think we have to be careful of what, trying to understand what the limits and the parameters of that of the strengths and weaknesses of Open City Hall. As far as you're preparing for a possible mandate in an ordinance, as we saw the last 48 hours as we've tried to put together an ordinance, it's a little challenging for us to gather all that in such a short time. Brian is absolutely correct in that if you leave it up to the chair to actually call the meeting when a draft ordinance is ready, then we can, better vet it, better, give the public a chance to see what's in it in order to get comment at that point. And, but it is helpful to us as staff if we have time to gather your input and talk to you, whether it's in a committee or in small groups or one-to-one or whatever, so that we have a better sense of what's in the meeting rather than making the sausage without knowing the ingredients in a council meeting.
Ms. Ellsworth.
Yeah, I would just hope and pray and lobby and advocate that we don't create a committee around this and then we just get it done.
I have no interest in a committee. So would everybody like me to restate the motion and leave out a specific date for the next meeting?
I would prefer that. I would prefer a motion, like I said, that just focuses on the need for further work on the draft and enough time to be able to come to reasonable agreement on the shape and direction of it in time for a later vote, and leave out the extraneous issues.
Okay, I will not editorialize, Mr. Chairman. I move that we table any vote on an ordinance this evening while still having a good discussion on key issues and allowing us time until we reconvene to seek additional input from businesses, schools, administration, police, and allow for a reopening and extension of the city survey.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable with the city survey question issue being in there. That's just me. I just want to vote on whether or not we're tabling a vote on the ordinance. I suppose we could have that discussion at a later point, but I'm content with what the city survey's done so far.
Why don't we just do a quick straw vote on that and save some time? If a majority is not interested in extending, I'll just remove it from the motion.
That's fine. What do the others feel?
The only reason I raised it is because I had quite a few callers and emailers say they were troubled that it was a relatively short fuse on the survey. I just don't want frustrated citizens who feel they have something to say.
Mr. Sewell?
I don't really see any downside to reopening it for 4 or 5 days or however long until we schedule our next special session.
All right, Mr. Hoban?
Same thing. I think it might help people feel like they had a chance to voice their opinion, which I think is important. Does staff have any concerns how much effort or time is put into reopening and tabulating results and such?
Ms. Ellsworth?
Yeah, I'm afraid that a no vote on the ordinance tonight is just too late. It's a no vote altogether because it's too late.
Well, I'm willing to. I'm willing to support the reopening of the Open City Hall. I guess I was a little wary of some other kind of survey or questionnaire that might be proposed. I accept the reality that there's enough difference of opinion, or maybe it's not so much a difference of opinion at this point, but uncertainty about the draft itself and its clarity as in its present state under the rather short term that we've been trying to put it together. I appreciate that. I would prefer that there's a lot more clarity and hopefully more unity when we vote on it. So even though I have very strong feelings about doing this sooner than later, I am concerned that if we tried to push forward tonight, it might not end up being either exactly what we want or what enough of us want that it sends the kind of message that I think it needs to send. So I'm like I say, I would have preferred that we were in a position to go forward. I note that Mr. Harding is not here this evening. He was sort of at peace with the idea that he couldn't be here and would not be able to vote. But one advantage of waiting a little bit longer is that we could have him back and we could do full council. And I feel more comfortable about that. But I would be open to, and we can discuss that, I guess, later. But I would be open to either Tuesday or Thursday next week, and making it happen as quickly as possible. So I'm prepared to support the motion. I don't know if the restatement, did it get a second? I apologize. I should have been.
The restatement of the motion includes the reopening the survey.
The restatement of the motion did not get a second, at least officially.
I just want to clarify, I'm content with the way you've restated it. Mr. Sewell, did you want to second that? Was that a hand? Seconding that. Ms. Ellsworth.
Yeah, I'm curious, when is the earliest possible date that we could meet together again?
Seems like Tuesday is the most logical. I think, I suppose Monday's a possibility that's very rare, although not unthinkable. But it may give my personal feeling is Tuesday would be soon. It would be okay if that is easier to facilitate than a Monday, and it would give us at least 24 more hours to be working on the draft and feeling good about it.
Yeah, I'd feel great about Tuesday myself.
Okay.
It's a jazz game, but I support it.
Sacrifices. Okay, any further discussion of the motion? I'll call for and I apologize, I've been missing the, I'll call for a vote on the motion. I'll begin with Ms. Ellsworth,
Yes.
Mr. Fillmore,
Yes.
Mr. Hoban,
Yes.
Mr. Sewell,
Yes.
Mr. Shipley,
Yes.
and I will vote yes. So that is unanimous with Mr. Harding excused. So we do have some time. I, as usual, am looking at the clock and thinking about a 9 o'clock finish time if we can get there. But I do think it would be helpful for us to make some progress tonight on what we feel should be, maybe some of our concerns or some of our desires for this ordinance. I would like to just begin, if it's okay with the council, with just some thoughts about the philosophical issue that Mr. Fillmore, I know I'm not getting into the meat of the ordinance itself yet, but I'm not a little concerned. I'm very concerned about a high level of distrust in government. And I'm concerned that there's misunderstanding about the role of government and the role of city government in particular in our community, because there are accusations flying that this is a violation of the constitutional rights, of human rights, that this is not the role of city government, and so on and so forth. And I know there are philosophical differences even on the question of self-regulation. But if I can just briefly say that in my cursory understanding of the history of the development of democracy, we are not alone charged with protecting the individual right to do whatever an individual chooses. The whole purpose of government is when self-regulating individuals come into contact with other self-regulating individuals, and they discover that there might be some need for what we might consider to be joint regulation agreements, things that are compacts or contracts or laws, that thereby people learn how not to do harm to one another and learn how to live in harmony with one another. So I don't know why it's necessary to say that, but honestly, I'm disappointed and worried that there is a discourse in our culture that is not understanding that the purpose of government is actually to promote the safety and health and well-being of a community. And it is, in fact, to ensure that we do not harm each other and that we allow each other to flourish individually. And I just wanted to quote briefly from a favorite child of Utah Valley, Adam Smith, who said that governments should allow every man to pursue his own interest his own way. But he also believed it was necessary for the state, by the way, to intervene. I read this in the paper just today. During a contagion or epidemic, any government was then obliged, he says, to invest the most serious attention to prevent a leprosy or any other loathsome or offensive disease from spreading itself among the great body of the people, even when these were not mortal or dangerous. He concluded by saying, he is not a citizen who does not wish to promote by every means in his power the welfare of the whole society of his fellow citizens. The wise and virtuous man is at all times willing that his own private interest should be sacrificed to the public interest of his own particular order or society. He is at all times willing, too, that the interest of this order or society should be sacrificed to the greater interest of the state or sovereignty of which it is only a subordinate part. I only mention that because I think it's vital that we figure out what is best calculated to prevent the most mortality, the greatest levels of mortality, or the higher levels of mortality in the case of COVID-19. That's what I'm after. I'm after saving lives. I'm not interested in whether or not it's inconvenient for people if it's going to save lives. I'm willing personally to make any sacrifices of my conveniences to save lives, and I hope everyone in this community is ready to do that. And BYU's mandate is advertising widely right now a positive campaign about saving other lives, about doing the compassionate thing. That's the spirit with which I want to operate in this discussion. And I know that still means we may have differences of opinion about whether or not an ordinance is necessary or the right thing to do. I just don't want that kind of logic to creep into our community, because I think that's harmful. It sows distrust and it sows fears, and I don't think it promotes the kind of commitment to common good that we need to tackle this terrible disease. I've said enough. Mr. Fillmore, go ahead. You're muted.
I want to say, Mr. Chairman, while I have some misgivings about broad community mandates with respect to masking, I will say as a lawyer, there's absolutely no doubt that the city council has the authority under the police powers to act for the benefit of the health, safety, and welfare of our community. That's why we have seatbelts mandated. That's why we forbid texting while driving. It's why we regulate restaurants and food producers. That constitutional issue sailed a long time ago. So I support you 100% philosophically on that point.
Ms. Ellsworth.
Yeah, similar to your ideas, Mr. Hanley, I've been thinking about this a lot, and we certainly do have the authority to create laws that keep people safe and that keep people healthy. About 4 years ago this week, on a Saturday morning at 8 a.m., I was driving to the Provo City Center Temple, and a person was driving and they were on their cell phone, and they drove into my car. They T-boned me in the driver door. And to me, there's a lot of parallels between that situation and the current situation that we're in, because I didn't die. Most people don't die in car accidents, but you don't know what could happen. There might not be any injuries. It might just be damages to the car, but there might be bodily injuries for a few years or for the rest of their life. And in my case, from that car accident, I have bodily injuries and pain that I will experience for the rest of my life. And to me, COVID-19 is a very similar situation. And we should create a law that keeps people from texting and driving, which we have. And we should create a law that keeps people from not wearing masks in public places or in densely populated, highly frequented public spaces. We require seatbelts, like you said. We require traffic signals and speed limits, and we criminalize distracted driving. And those are laws that make a dangerous activity less dangerous. And that is why we need masks, to make a dangerous pandemic less dangerous. Are we going to die? Probably not. But might we have long-term effects if we caught COVID-19? Yeah, we could. And I'm not willing to take those chances, and I'm not willing to take those chances for people in our community, because they're real people. When we talk about numbers, these are real people. And I think we should do what's best for them, what's right by them, and really promote with an ordinance that we value their health, that we value their lives, that we value their safety. So I think that we should keep moving forward as soon as possible, because the clock is ticking and we're late. We're way late. We're behind.
Brian, I'm wondering if you would be willing to walk us through a little bit of some of the chief questions that are pertinent to the ordinance, some of the issues that you feel like we could provide some guidance on that would help us get closer to the draft we're happy with.
Yeah, let me go through some of the questions that I had, and then I think at that point it's probably best for those in the council who have input maybe about issues that I haven't raised, if there's still time to raise some of those issues and have philosophical discussions about that. The first one that is still at least somewhat, well, still unanswered for me, as far as understanding the will of the council as a body, is what exactly the parameters of the mandate would be, of the requirement to wear face coverings would be, and in what situations they would be required. So some of the things that have been proposed and discussed, but I don't feel like have been narrowed down, are does the requirement apply only indoors, or does it apply outdoors as well? And just as a general matter, without regard to specific situations. And then related to that, there has been a discussion about, in addition to the generic requirement or the general requirement of wearing face coverings where social distancing is not possible, there's also been a discussion about potentially requiring it at large public gatherings, even if social distancing is possible at those locations. And so I'd be interested in the council's input on the question of whether or not that should be included. And then again, with regard to that question, whether that applies only indoors or outdoors as well.
Any thoughts on those questions from the council? I might just say quickly that just given what we know about the associated dangers of indoor spaces as opposed to outdoor spaces, it seems to me that our focus ought to be on indoor, and because that's where we understand the disease is much more likely to be transmitted. It's actually quite rare outdoors. I think from what I understand, it requires prolonged kind of face-to-face conversation that's not socially distant when one is outside, but indoors it's much more likely to not only be communicated into aerosol form, but also kind of lingering in the atmosphere. So it does seem to me that we're going to be the most effective if we target indoor spaces.
And I guess in the interest of time, I would say, I don't know that everybody has to speak to that, but for each one of these questions, after someone has, maybe the most effective thing would be after a council member has taken a position on it, anybody who disagrees should speak up, and I'll take, if nobody does, I'll take it as the general consensus that that's the principle that you want in.
I think, can I comment?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think we should make some provisions for outdoors. When we talked about brew pubs, we often considered what the worst case scenario could be. And I'm thinking about what could be the worst case scenario. And that might be 1,000 students in a steak opening social at a park. And I'd hate to say that, you know, the COVID-19 virus was transmitted at that event because we were negligent. So I think that we need to consider the worst case scenario and make some provisions for outdoors.
Mr. Hoban, sorry.
I don't worry so much about outdoors personally. I think obviously it could be transmitted outdoors. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Just have to check. I think, so I'm not so much worried about outdoors. I think large gatherings, I think, Brian, you asked about that as well. So an indoor gathering where social distancing could occur. I think the reality of it is you go to an event with 100, 200 people and they're not social distancing. The point is they're there to interact. Nobody's staying 6 feet apart. You know, I'm not, I think if we do pass a mandate and we're looking at, indoor events, I think the large events, what you have at a large event is the possibility of transmission to many more people in one setting. So if I'm with 5 friends at an event and we're indoors, not social distancing, without masks on, you know, maybe those 5 people get it. But when you have an event of, you know, 100, 200, 300 people, then you're transmitting potential to transmit is greatly increased. And then those people also have a much larger network that they then transmit onto. So I think I'm kind of speaking to that question. I think, Brian, where, would we want something enforced indoors, even if social distancing could be possible at a large event? And I think there's much higher risk at large events. So I think there's some justification there. If we end up going with a mandate, there's some justification for the larger events, even if social distancing could occur.
Mr. Shipley.
Yeah, I guess speaking to the question before about indoor versus outdoor, principally, I agree that most of the risk is indoor, but I agree also with Ms. Ellsworth that I think we're just asking these parties that where people don't social distance to go outside. And I don't think that solves our issue. It doesn't help, prevent spread to have 100 high school students on a Y hike together in close proximity with each other the entire time. That's going to create spread. So I think we need, whether or not we tackle it in terms of groups and just with the group part of the mandate, or whether or not we tackle it in terms of just the broader mandate. I don't have a preference. It could, we could, as far as the broad mandate, it could be indoor, and then we do something, and speak to the issue of groups in a separate, on a separate light item. But I think it would be silly for us to avoid anything outdoor, because I think, we're just pushing those same parties outside, and those parties are going to have spread.
Mr. Sewell.
I'd like to suggest that we approach this a little bit differently. I think the real home run here, if it's possible, would be to find some common ground with the administration. And I would be willing to go for a very, very limited mandate that targets the most egregious and dangerous situations if we could find that common ground. So maybe, for example, so the police chief, instead of worrying about fielding 100 calls a week from people complaining about someone at the store, or, that maybe he only has to field a couple of calls a week regarding these large indoor events that are really dangerous in potentially spreading the virus very quickly. Maybe it doesn't have to be the police. I don't know. Are there other options, ways to enforce it? Could we involve the county health department? I know we don't have jurisdiction over them, but if we told them that we wanted to pass an ordinance, would they be willing to fill that role for us here in Provo? I don't know. I think these things should be explored. So what I would propose is that council leadership sits down with the mayor and with our police chief at the earliest opportunity and just see, is there something that we can come up with, again, very limited, that they would be willing to stand behind and stand with us on. To me, that's the home run. And I think there's a lot more value in that than the current situation, even if we have a broader and perhaps, to our mind, more desirable mandate. If we have this situation where some citizens are coming after the council saying we don't care about liberty and freedom, and coming after the mayor saying they don't care about health and safety, it's just not a good situation. So anyway, I just like to throw that out there. And then once we have had that conversation, and if there just is no middle ground, there's no way to come together on it, then I would also want to know from the mayor and the police chief, if we pass something, what are you going to do? Are you going to vocally and publicly oppose it? Are you going to keep quiet and not enforce it? Or are you going to do your best with very limited resources and use your discretion to at least enforce it somewhat according to how you think it should be prioritized? So I would like to know that before we decide on the specifics. We quoted the there might be a 15% bump if we pass a mandate with no enforcement. I don't know, but I'm going to assume that in that kind of a situation, you have at least tacit cooperation from the executive branch. I think that number goes way down if you don't. Maybe it's 10%, maybe it's 5%, maybe it's 0, maybe it doesn't. If citizens are seeing that conflict, maybe it doesn't help at all. I don't know. So anyway, that's my suggestion.
Mr. Fillmore.
First, I definitely agree with Mr. Sewell. We need to make a really concerted effort to find common ground with the administration if we can. I believe there's a place for mandating masks. I think it needs to be very limited, very surgical. Personally, I'm focused on large groups. I don't like the idea of focusing on individuals, let alone citing them or coming after them, penalizing them. I think David Shipley makes the right point that large groups are a problem both indoors and outdoors. Maybe there's some nuances to address there, but if you focus solely on indoors, then they just move outdoors. I think we've all been appalled by the videos and the news clips from dance parties, as well as demonstrations, protests, where masks are not worn by anybody. I think that's worth addressing. I think we've got to give some very serious thought to the enforcement issue here. I've heard people talk about enforcement by education. Well, that doesn't make sense. Education has got to be a key component, but I don't think it's an enforcement mechanism. We don't have the luxury of a city health department, so we can't do what Salt Lake County does. They pass the mask mandate and they enforce it through their health inspectors, through the health department, which makes sense to me. Going to businesses who are mandated to require masks. We don't have that luxury, and I'm not sure at all that our county health department wants to go that far, but it's a question worth asking. I think it's inevitably probably going to fall to the police, and that's one more reason for being very limited, very surgical in what we're trying to do here. Otherwise, we create huge problems for our police. The last thing I want to emphasize again is I don't want to criminalize this. I don't want to see individuals certainly with misdemeanors because they violated the mask mandate. I'd like to focus on groups. And if we're going to go after somebody, it would be the leaders of an entity that organizes it, or the organizers, even if there's no entity or formal organization. And what we would do is a civil citation, an infraction, a fine, but nothing criminal. Anyway, those are my thoughts, and I think we got a lot of talking to do in the interim.
Mr. Hogan.
Yeah, actually, I agree perfectly with what Dave or Mr. Sewell had his approach to it, ensuring that we find something that the administration can get behind. I think second to the administration, as far as stakeholders go, I think our businesses need to be engaged, and I've mentioned that. But we really need our businesses behind this as well, because employers and restaurants and things like that ultimately are going to be your best enforcers of whatever we decide. And, we'll have very little impact if we don't have, and when I say enforcers, I'm not saying we need to ask a business to kick people out or whatever, but I'm saying businesses put up signs saying, social distancing required, or, mask required, whatever they choose, whatever stipulations limitations or stipulations we put on this potential mandate. I also think, and I've mentioned all this in my emails the last few days, but I think choice is important. I think giving businesses an opportunity to choose whether they want to enforce masks or enforce social distancing, something like that, I think can go a long ways. And then ultimately, this sounds kind of petty, but I think how we package this and present this, and I think the administration being on board or not on board has a lot to, will have a lot to do with how successful we are at kind of selling whatever we decide to the community, whether it's a no or a yes. We've got to find a way to package this and present it and communicate it in a way that will lead to success as opposed to significant backlash or failure. Because ultimately that's what we're trying to accomplish is to help people be safe. And so, I just think there's a lot of care that needs to be taken to that aspect of it. Hasn't really been brought up so much. So I wanted to make sure that, I stated that.
Ms. Ellsworth.
Yeah, I agree with what's been said about this being infraction and not a misdemeanor. I don't think we should criminalize it. There's other laws on the books I don't think we should criminalize. And yeah, I think it would take a really blatant offense for us to even give someone a citation with an infraction. It seems like that's what other places have been doing. Is it basically goes without punitive enforcement, and I personally don't want to be heavy-handed. I think that we should send a message, and I think people will 10, 15, 20% of people will comply, in addition to the people who are already complying. My concern is that if we're not broad enough, we won't prevent the spread of COVID-19. And what that could mean is that cases begin to spike at one or both universities, and one or both universities decides that, we're going to close, we're going to go online. Maybe it's mid-September, and, we can list a dozen other college communities who have seen this in the last month. But if either of those two universities or both decided to close, they probably wouldn't reopen in January. And I can't speak for them. I haven't talked to representatives at either university, but my idea is that they wouldn't reopen in January, and that they would say, okay, we'll try again in the fall of 2021. And what that would mean for businesses in Provo, small businesses, locally owned businesses, is that their bottom line would suffer until those students come back. I think it would cripple our economy because we truly depend on those more than 30,000 students who shop in our city. So I feel incentivized to do something serious but not punitive in order to reduce the spread, in order to keep those universities open and keep students here shopping in our community, as well as not passing it to their professors and the professors' kids and the professors' grandmas. So yeah, I think that we have multiple incentives to take this seriously.
I would second Ms. Ellsworth's feelings about this. I would not be in favor of an ordinance that doesn't have anything to say about individuals going into indoor spaces, because that is, again, the science tells us that's where the vast majority of the transmissions are going to occur. I mean, I can understand certain scenarios where outdoor gatherings could get out of control. And maybe we need to put some language in there to prevent that. And if we don't, maybe we go through and work closely with BYU to try to make sure that large parties like that, at least sponsored by churches and so on, are not going to be planned and executed because of the risks associated. But there have been many cases where people have been overly alarmed about people on beaches where their chances of transmitting the disease are much lower. Even though the large number of people can seem very alarming, it's in the enclosed spaces, it's in our offices, it's in our businesses where this is going to spread. And I just want to suggest to all of us that our goal, again, is to prevent the spread. It's to minimize the risk. So I'm interested in what is going to target those areas of highest risk, and find ways to make that manageable, find ways to make it not too onerous, and, you know, with all the reasonable exceptions and maybe a light-handed approach to enforcement. But I think there's still plenty of evidence that clear guidelines and signage and education in an ordinance like this will go a long way to spread the disease. So I guess I'm just still trying to answer Brian's question. I'm mostly interested in indoor. If there's some language in there about outdoor, I'm open to that. But I think we'd be making a mistake if we just went for the lightest version of an ordinance that we could come up with that ends up not actually effectually doing what we're trying to get it to do.
Agreed.
Mr. Hoban?
Yeah, so I guess I was thinking we wouldn't go for the lightest, we would go for the most bang for our buck. So, you know, we keep saying a mask mandate will improve, compliance by 15 to 20%, right? Well, is there something we can do that gives us 14 out of that 15%, yet still enables people to feel like their individual freedoms aren't being infringed upon so much, you know? So does most of the transmission occur at these large events? And is that something we can look to regulate? And then the other 99.9% of the people out there aren't really impacted by this. So I'm not looking necessarily at something light and useless. I'm looking at something efficient and very impactful, yet less intrusive to most people most of the time. I don't know if that makes sense, but I would probably think that some of the others would agree to that we're not necessarily, those of us who are kind of making this point right now aren't necessarily looking for something that's not impactful or light, but gives us the most bang for our buck.
Yeah, I guess all I'm saying, Mr. Hoban, in response to that is that if we bypassed saying anything about, you know, whether or not masks should be worn in gas stations and in shops and so on, then I think we're missing a vital opportunity to actually slow or prevent the spread of the disease.
Yeah, I would just add to that. It's not just big events that are the culprit, right? It's just everyday life. It's everyday life. Here's my anecdote for the night. My cousin got COVID-19 from his roommate. His roommate got COVID-19 at work. And that's how it's going to spread. Somebody's going to get it at school. Somebody's going to get it at work. Somebody's going to get it at church. Somebody's going to get it at a party. Somebody's going to get it at their neighbor's house. It's not large gatherings only.
I think I would like to, sorry, I was muted for a second there. I think I would like to talk to Mr. Abbott again to see if I could get a better grasp of, you know, almost could we rank situations where COVID is getting passed on and then use that to help inform some of our decisions. I think, and maybe that's already available. I'm sure it is. But with the limited time we had, I don't think any of us could really come into this meeting informed enough to know, you know, what is most effective. And so if that's something we could pursue as far as a better understanding of exactly what is going to have the most impact, I think that would be helpful.
Mr. Fillmore, you're muted.
Let me just clarify one point. I'm not saying that the disease is only transmitted in large groups. Obviously, it's transmitted person to person in apartments and businesses and on the street. What I'm saying is that the most egregious potential for passing the virus is when you're in large groups and unmasked. And that would be possibly an easier enforcement matter than burdening our police with trying to enforce against individuals who aren't wearing masks on the street or in the store or in their apartment complex. That's a nightmare for our police. They don't have the manpower for it. They have higher priorities. They have felonies that they have to deal with. Warrants, for that matter, our municipal court has no desire to be flooded with citations. It's just the impracticability of it. That's why I think when it comes to individuals in apartments and businesses, that we allow the businesses to make their own decisions. Hopefully they'll mandate, that's up to them, like Walmart and Target. But otherwise, we just strongly encourage, we give them reasons for doing it. And we expand the already excellent education effort by the mayor's office. I just can't see enforcement against individuals and burdening the police and the courts with that.
Well, maybe Mr. Jones, you can clarify something that keeps coming back to this question. It seems to me that, you know, having legislation that bans large gatherings involves the police just as much as something that might be more individualized. I mean, maybe we would imagine that the phone calls could be out of control with you know, going after individual behavior. I mean, I will just reiterate again, it's symbolic to go after large outdoor gatherings because that's not, as far as I understand, and I'm happy to be corrected on this, but that's not where the transmissions are most likely to be happening. So, I mean, the worst cases are definitely large indoor gatherings, right? Where people are not social distancing and they're not wearing masks. There's no question that what we saw with that party is one of the worst examples. But I don't think we're going to effectively slow the spread of the disease if we're only going after large outdoor gatherings or even large indoor gatherings. That's, again, my feeling on this. But I'm still not convinced, though, and maybe I'm naive about this and need more education, and we need to talk to other police departments where these mandates have happened. But I'm not convinced that because we designate something as you know, prohibited in our ordinance, that we are faced with problems of enforcement of the kind that become. I want to find creative solutions to that problem. I don't want to and maybe I'm wrong, and maybe there's no way to find a creative solution to that problem, but I would like more information about it. I'm not convinced that an otherwise lightly enforced ordinance is not effectual. There's plenty of evidence to the contrary on that. Mr. Jones, do you have any insights on that would be helpful?
Well, let me first clarify one of your comments, and this was the subject of some discussion before, but let me just clarify that we're not talking, at least in my mind, in part because I don't think we can, I don't think we're talking about banning large gatherings. We're talking about requiring masks, face coverings at large gatherings. And the question is, yeah, and you know, the question that I asked was, are we requiring those face coverings only if social distancing can't occur, or when there's a size threshold, are we requiring them even when social distancing can occur? And if so, are we doing it only inside, or are we doing it inside and outside? So those are kind of, yeah, go ahead.
I would just quickly say, if social distancing is possible outside, I don't think we need to require masks. That's where I would come out on that.
And then, so trying to think what your other question is.
Just a question about enforcement. You know, do we know from experiences at other cities? Do we know that they have floods of phone calls and have onerous difficulties because they passed an ordinance, or was it manageable? Because I mean, I don't know. I know we have speed limits, and I know that speed limits are rarely enforced, or they're certainly randomly enforced, or they're enforced at hotspots where it really matters most because our resources are thin. I don't know why this is any different, and I don't know why we would believe that not posting speed limits and talking about it in driver's ed doesn't actually help. Of course it does. And so I think the same principle applies here, but I don't know. I'm just trying to understand why, or if there's a way in which an ordinance doesn't lead to enforcement nightmares that we keep imagining are likely, which I would like to know.
I don't have any information about that. I have heard the police chief say that he has spoken with other jurisdictions, and my understanding that as a result of that was simply that he was told that no citations have been issued in any jurisdiction. And I have no information about whether that means police officers talked to thousands of people and gave them verbal warnings but gave nobody a citation, or if police officers completely ignored the mandates and talked to nobody. I have no idea.
I think we need to get that information. Mr. Hoban, go ahead. And it's past 9, so let me encourage us to wrap this up for tonight in the next 5 minutes.
Yeah, three things, and I'll be quick. The one I was going to say is I was going to clarify too, not banning large events. I didn't want to get a bunch of comments on that. So Brian covered that. The other thing I was going to say is it's after 9, and I'm wondering if I should go grab a Mountain Dew or not, because it's going to take about 20 minutes for the caffeine to get into my system. And I don't want to go grab Mountain Dew and then be up all night. So are we ending soon? And then the third thing I was going to say is I get the sentiment of people comparing this to seatbelts or speeding. I totally get that. But I also think it's important to keep in mind that the first seatbelt laws were passed in 1965, and they were to require manufacturers to place seatbelts. There were no restrictions on individual freedoms. Most of those laws came in the 80s, so almost 20 years later. And still today, there's actually, Rhode Island doesn't even require seatbelts. They never implemented a seatbelt law. So my point being that there, sometimes these things take time for people to grasp. And so to jump in, with both feet, or even to jump in head first, I just go back to the public perception and packaging and how we present this. And I understand the sentiment of that, but we can't completely compare the two, because there was a lot of time and legislation and communication and research and data. And we're looking to literally do something. Well, if we want to go back to COVID, the start of COVID, within a matter of months, or if we want to go back to when we started this conversation, it was 2 days ago. And so I understand where people are coming from when they push back. And I think it's a matter of having more support behind this. And so that's, I think, one of the things we're trying to accomplish with taking a couple days, to maybe do a little more research and get some more input and buy-in from some of the stakeholders. But maybe you could just answer my question about the Mountain Dew first.
Chair Handley, maybe to help you answer Travis's question, I'd like to maybe make a suggestion about a couple of options that the council has at this point. You and I had a discussion earlier about the fact that in the normal course of business, when it's not an emergency situation, this would be a discussion that we would be having in a work session, and that maybe we would be having in multiple work sessions over multiple weeks of time to try to nail things down. I will say, and without any rancor or frustration, but just as a statement of fact, I'm not any less confused now than I was when we started about what would go into an ordinance that the body of the council would actually approve. So I think there's a couple ways to handle that. One would be, as Mr. Sewell is very familiar from our work on the council handbook, there's a strong reason why Robert's Rules usually says you shouldn't even have a discussion unless somebody has made a motion first, because the motion frames what the discussion is about. And so one way to handle this, if you want to handle it tonight, would be for individual council members who have a strong opinion about something to make a motion and see how many support it. And one option could be somebody makes a motion at the most minimal level of mandate that they think ought to be at a minimum included, and we work our way up. The opposite would be somebody who thinks they have the most aggressive stance makes a motion to have the broadest principle included in the mandate that they want, and we take a vote to see how many people are in favor of that and work our way down. I think that's going to be a very lengthy process even for tonight. So with kind of maybe some input from Cliff, the one other thing that I've thought of is if you did want to just kind of generally wrap the discussion up tonight, maybe Cliff and I could get together and on early Monday, maybe send you a survey of here is a whole list of things that might or might not be included in an ordinance, and we could hopefully get 7 responses that tally how many of each one of those things would actually be supported, and put something together. There may be other ways to do it. I know that Mr. Fillmore had some ideas too, and so there may be more effective ways, but those are the thoughts that I'm having right now as the discussion kind of continues to revolve around issues that I still don't know what the body of the council would support.
Thanks, Mr. Jones. I mean, look, I appreciate we're doing this very, we're sort of in uncharted territory in a lot of ways. And I apologize that I haven't been able to focus this brief post-delay vote discussion in a better, more effective direction. But I think your suggestions are very helpful. I do, however, think that it's 9:15 and I'm not interested in dragging this out any longer. So I think your second option might be the better way to go. So I'm going to ask Ms. Ellsworth and Mr. Hoban to make their comments, and then I'd like to wrap it up.
I was going to say I don't think we make a motion to, gauge the most extreme or the most limited mandate right now. I prefer personally to gather some more information, to talk to some more stakeholders, whether that be us as a council or you as leadership. And then we do possibly what Mr. Jones said, which was to try to quantify, what we want in a mandate, if at all, what people are comfortable with.
Ms. Ellsworth.
Yeah, I just wanted to address Mr. Fillmore's concerns. I likewise would be concerned if I thought or really thought anyone else expected the police to go out and give individual citations. That's not my intent. I don't think it's anyone's intent. And I can tell you that in Provo, there are many, many laws, many ordinances passed by the council that aren't enforced. One example is chicken coops. Chicken coops have to be so far from the fence line, right? Basically putting a chicken coop in the middle of someone's backyard. And it's not enforced. And when a citizen came to me and said, hey, I don't want to put my chicken coop in the middle of my backyard, they also told me that other council members told them, oh, don't worry, we don't enforce that. You can put your chicken coop wherever you want. The other law that we don't enforce in Provo is that of the rental disclosure and acknowledgement document, where if you're a renter, you and your landlord are both supposed to sign a document that says you understand Provo City's laws. That is not something that Provo City enforces. They don't really ask people to sign that document, and to my knowledge, no one's ever been issued a misdemeanor for not complying with signing that document. But there is a misdemeanor on the books if you don't sign that document. So there's a large amount of ordinances that the city doesn't enforce. And I think there's plenty of ordinances that we don't expect the city to enforce, that we think would be kind of egregious if we did enforce them. And I see people in other cities and counties and states having the same mentality about the mask mandate. They're not trying to be punitive, and they're not sending their officers out to cite people who aren't wearing masks. I think that would be excessive. So I think there are opportunities to create an ordinance and it not be broadly or punitively enforced.
If I could just wrap up on that point, Mr. Jones and Mr. Strachan, I think my sense is, not only from tonight's discussion, but talking with different counselors over the last several days, none of us wants this to be a burden on the police. None of us wants this to become a situation in which tensions rise and increase. And I know there are people who would have reasonable doubts about whether that's even possible. But it does seem to me that if we can wrestle that question and resolve that question a little more clearly, then that opens up the questions in our minds about what we would want in the ordinance and what we wouldn't. In other words, because I feel like right now we're debating whether we want certain things in the ordinances or not on the basis of whether or not they're going to be burdensome. And if we can come to some sort of understanding about the fact that about how that may or may not be relevant, then I think that might actually open up, more possibilities for what we feel like could reasonably be in there. Anyway, we're out of time, so I'm just wondering if that helps a little bit. I think that's been probably the number one issue for the council is is there a way we can do this that doesn't create those tensions, that doesn't create those burdens, and will it be effectual even if that's the case? And I don't know, maybe there's no way to know the answer to that definitively, but it would be helpful to know. Maybe our staff can help us research this a little bit about the experiences in other cities and in other states, and we can continue to research a little bit more about the science on it to understand what would be the areas that would be most important to minimize risk. And then hopefully by Monday morning, we will have done some of our homework. And when you send us that list, we'll be better prepared to give you responses. Does that sound reasonable to everybody?
Could I just make one comment about maybe something for you to think about as you do your homework and when you get the list? I really appreciate the discussion about enforcement and the logistics. I want to make sure that there's not a dissonance between that and the expectations, because I've heard several people express we don't want there to be severe penalties for this, but then I've heard some of those same people and other people say, in fact, I only want it enforced against the most egregious violations. And for me, there's a little bit of dissonance there in the sense that if it's already not being enforced against everything but the most egregious violations, it doesn't really matter what the penalties are because they're not being imposed anyway. But if you make the penalties so small, then does it really do anything to dissuade the egregious violations? So I just invite you to think about that as you consider it over the weekend.
All right. Well, if there is no objection, I would suggest we will now adjourn the Provo Municipal Council meeting.
George, are we adjourning until Tuesday night specifically?
That is.
Do we need a motion to that effect?
I think, oh no, I guess the motion was indefinite and there was just some discussion about Tuesday was the soonest, right?
I would recommend you don't tie yourself to Tuesday. Wait till you feel like you've got enough so that George can call a meeting on 24 hours notice.
Okay.
So whether it's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, whatever's best.
All right. Okay, so hearing no objection, the meeting is now adjourned, and appreciate your efforts. Thank you to the staff again, as it's been said before. You've all been great. So have a good evening.
Thanks.